Gamers of the Underworld. Chapters 293 to 323. Chapter 293. Lilo's Trust. Brainiac deeply pondered about the gates of hell that had been shut. The gates of hell was Lord Sherlock's special method of opening the wall at the end of the tunnel. It created a tunnel that looked like mirrors. This name was given by the gamers. They were unable to travel through the tunnel because the gates of hell disappeared soon after Sherlock vanished. The gates had become a huge wall again. The disappearance of Lord Sherlock was related to the gates of hell. Brainiac examined the statue and chest that opened the gates of hell for many days. He was sure there was no more mana on them. Even the runes had faded. But it was hard to say because the statue didn't have runes or mana previously. With Sherlock's activation, the statue moved and chiseled through the wall, thus opening the gates of hell. There wasn't much time for Brainiac to ponder. The whistle-blowing gamers had led Andrew and the Winterfell residents here. Because of the discussion forum, the encounters of the gamers weren't kept confidential. Moreover, the gamers treated this as a strange encounter mission. They were doing everything for the rewards. Andrew had given them enough benefits. Andrew had the expression of, "I'm doing it for the Merchant Alliance." He ordered his subordinates to transport the huge statue and the chest that had been used by Sherlock away. The reporters were busy snapping pictures of the scene. Brainiac watched them leave without emotion. Only a group of orcs and the adventurous gamers who were waiting for new plots were left behind. What should I do? Brainiac couldn't help thinking about it. Apple brought his orcs back to their village. Though the village had lots of pits and looked very different, it was still their homeland. Though Dungeon Lord Andrew invited them to Winterfell, they didn't want to speak to him because he was the mastermind of the attacks. Besides the reporters, who were anxious to make headlines, the Winterfell residents didn't believe the news, or rather, they weren't bothered. Winterfell Dungeon Lord Andrew left with Michelangelo's relic. This news spread like wildfire on the discussion forum, and the gamers expressed differing opinions. One of the opinions was that the relic was the game's strange encounter mission. Though Andrew wasn't an adorable or attractive character, he could be a future hero like the evil character Illidan Stormrage, who later became the savior. Other gamers admired the secret scheming behind the background that Andrew characterized. Some even explored the possibility of whistle-blowing and defecting to Andrew. The popular opinion was to condemn the gamers who betrayed Eternal Kingdom and had no sense of shame. They were willing to betray Shirley for a few benefits. As the gamers obtained the latest news on the forum, Lilo also got a hold of the information while she was en route to the Orc village. After Sherlock disappeared, Dungeon Lord Andrew hijacked Michelangelo's relic. Is that correct? At a makeshift camp in the wilderness, Lilo obtained updated news from the gamers. Yes, Andrew is despicable. We suggest turning around and raiding Winterfell. After that, we'll kill and rob Andrew. Though Shirley has left us forever, we can't take this insult. We'll support you as the new Dungeon Lord, Unknown, not wearing pants, said seriously. Lilo didn't understand the words, not wearing pants, but she understood his words. The gamers behind also nodded in agreement. Yes, it's time we set up a new battle campaign scenario. Let's invade Winterfell. We raided a lot of loot the other time. We have to attack Winterfell again. Invade Winterfell and raid for loot. The sludge monster butler thought he had heard wrongly. The excited gamers were more interested in conquering Winterfell than Sherlock's whereabouts and his safety. Lilo wasn't affected by the gamers. She paused for a while and said to the gamers, "Go, let's go to your dungeon." Wait a minute, Miss Lilo. Aren't we investigating the disappearance of Lord Sherlock? His disappearance wasn't in Eternal Kingdom. Evelyn was worried when she saw Lilo boarding the Hades carriage in a bid to go to Eternal Kingdom. Lilo explained casually, "Perhaps you have only been with Sherlock for a short while, so you don't understand him. My understanding tells me that though things look out of control, everything is pre-arranged by him. If the statue and chest were easily taken away, it means that they are useless and we don't have to go there. Sherlock already knew what Michelangelo's relic was. Perhaps his disappearance is also pre-planned." Evelyn was taken aback. She didn't expect the aloof Lilo to have such trust in Sherlock. But she quickly asked, "Why didn't Lord Sherlock inform us? Or make some arrangements?" "I don't know," Lilo said directly. "When he appears again, you can ask him yourself. Perhaps he wanted to create a chaotic situation. But now, we have to return to the Eternal Kingdom. Wait, you said Sherlock will appear? Does Miss Lilo have a solution? Eggface asked excitedly. He then muttered to himself, that's great. I'll have unlimited bloody chrysanthemum tea and absolute freedom in playing computer games. I want a private suite with a personal computer that is full of good games. Eggface let his imagination run wild. Miss Lilo, do you really have a solution? Evelyn asked in anticipation. No, Lilo said simply. I'm thinking if he performs another disappearing act, I will extract his dungeon core and sell it to recoup my losses. Chapter 294. Ready to save the world. Are you frustrated over your long hair? Are you being discriminated against because you can't perm your hair curls? Purchase our cooling head and hair shedding package. You will never fret over your hair again. You will reach the pinnacle of your life. With the 3-day promotion for Winterfell's joining of the Alliance, you will get a chance to see Michelangelo's relic. What are you waiting for? Brainiac put down the copy of Winterfell Monthly Digest. He had returned with the gamers to Eternal Kingdom via the teleport portal. He was unable to do anything even if he stayed there. The gamers had to continue their game. Brainiac was a responsible lich. At this critical juncture, he had to help the missing Lord Sherlock manage the dungeon in an orderly fashion. When the gamers tried to gain access to the Dungeon Lord main hall, he would gaze at them with his empty eye sockets. Brainiac also stopped them when the gamers occupied the dungeon's land illegally, when they constructed buildings illicitly, when they pulled down buildings secretly, and when they tried to rob the weapons warehouse. When Brainiac returned to maintain order, a group of gamers was with Eggface, Evelyn, and Lilo. They returned to Eternal Kingdom via the teleport portal at Winterfell. A large group of gamers followed behind them to watch the plot animation unfold. Gosh, the recent plot is exciting. Shirley's missing. Brainiac became the Dungeon Lord, and Eggface and Evelyn went to look for Lilo for help. The evil Andrew controlled Winterfell and hijacked our Michelangelo's relic. This must be in preparation for Winterfell Fortress. I'm quite intrigued by your words. Andrew became the boss of an instance dungeon, while Brainiac and Lilo become friendly NPCs? The game officials should write a novel, Dungeon Gamers. Like Chronicles of Azeroth. Without Sherlock around, nobody could restrain them from chattering. Brainiac was used to their boisterous manners, but Lilo wasn't used to the noisy green-skinned creatures. After she came to Eternal Kingdom, she shut the green-skinned creatures outside the Dungeon Lord main hall. Or rather, she locked herself in the Dungeon Lord main hall. I don't think this is appropriate, Miss Lilo. Eggface sat in a chair and cupped his brewed bloody chrysanthemum tea. The previous seat of Sherlock was occupied by Lilo, and that was the only seat to play computer gamers. To be precise, that seat belonged to Eggface. Why is it not appropriate? Lord Sherlock and Lady Lilo are very close. They've known each other since before you were born. A fat hamster who stood beside Lilo said indignantly. 2 other hamsters stood beside him with the same posture. The rightmost hamster said, the green-skinned creatures love to speak. Why are they harassing us with their chattering? The leftmost hamster said, can we have our meals? I saw a black iron dwarf preparing food. The 3 hamster followed beside Lilo as though they were her bodyguards. Apologies, you are now on Lord Sherlock's private land. As his adjutant and secretary, I feel the need to inform you that you can't take away the dungeon core. Even if Lord Sherlock owes you money, you can't take the dungeon core as payment. I mean, Lord Sherlock will be back, Eggface said seriously. Our Lady didn't say she would take the dungeon core away. If Sherlock doesn't appear for a long time, she will take the dungeon core away. Wait, hasn't Lord Sherlock been missing for a long time? Is it mealtime yet? A commotion erupted outside. Lilo went out first and saw a huge teleport portal materialize in Eternal Kingdom's plaza. Sherlock walked out of the teleport portal. He was wearing a black cloak with a high collar and a red base. His shirt was black, and he looked like, since when did you become a vampire? And, where did you go, Sherlock? Lilo clasped her elbows and stood in front of Sherlock. Sherlock noticed Lilo and the 3 hamsters, Evelyn, Eggface, and Brainiac, all of whom came forward. And the numerous gamers who were busy watching the plot. It's a long story, Lilo. Sherlock exerted his dominance to restrain the gamers. He looked at the Dungeon Lord main hall behind him and said, shall we go in and chat? Lord Sherlock, my Lord Sherlock, I can't believe it, you left us for tens of days without any news. Do you know how worried I was? A lot of gamers lost control and were doing crazy stunts. Lord Sherlock, if you had come back a day later, I may have been sold by the fallen angel for money. And Andrew hijacked your private property. Guess what? It was Michelangelo's relic. Lord Sherlock, don't hesitate. Let's launch an attack before Andrew obtains the power of the relic. We'll take back the relic. Otherwise, the jealous Andrew will kill you once he takes control of the relic. Of that, I'm certain. Brew talked incessantly in Sherlock's mind. When Sherlock went missing, besides their mana connection, Brew had no communication with Sherlock. Brew assigned missions to the gamers and communicated to Eggface via the computer. He didn't have other avenues of communication and was unable to chat with Sherlock. Lord Sherlock, where did you go? Evelyn asked with concern. To explore certain interesting things, a part of history and memories. I also found a treasure and fought some monsters, Sherlock said casually. Do you know that your 2 toys were taken away by Dungeon Lord Andrew? Lilo looked at Sherlock and asked, was that intentional? Michelangelo's relic can help us counterattack the Heavenly Kingdom. You can't possibly let Andrew take it away, can you? Sherlock looked at Lilo and smiled as he said, you've moved back to Winterfell already? It's time to prepare. Prepare for? Eggface asked. Prepare to save the Underworld once again. Sherlock smiled as he said, let me tell you what happened for the past 10 days. Chapter 295. Statue. You entered the world of Michelangelo's memories and wandered for more than 10 days. Is it that simple? Eggface stared wide-eyed in shock. It wasn't really wandering. Most of the time, I was learning. Sherlock had already explained his experiences over the past 10 days to them. It was simple. He just took a look at Michelangelo's memories. Sherlock wasn't concerned with whether they believed him. Evelyn went back to the Adventurers Guild at the Old District to work. Brainiac returned to work. Lilo left with the 3 hamsters after she was sure Sherlock was all right. She couldn't stand the chattering of the gamers. She couldn't kill them or use other methods to shut them up. Before she left, she reminded Sherlock of their plan to conquer the Heavenly Kingdom. As for what Sherlock had learned in Michelangelo's memories, Sherlock didn't explain, and they didn't ask about it. Though he cleared everyone's doubts, he didn't explain the details. As for whether Sherlock planned to give the statue and chest to Dungeon Lord Andrew, Sherlock answered firmly, yes. Don't ask. This is the first step of my plan. After Sherlock returned, his first order to Brew was, prepare to conquer Winterfell. The large statue was transported horizontally through Winterfell's gate under the applause of the excited Underworld residents. The statue was placed in the courtyard of the Dungeon Lord. Dungeon Lord Andrew even gave a spirited speech and obtained the thunderous applause of the Underworld residents. Everyone was examining the statue. Who paid attention to Andrew's speech? Andrew wasn't bothered. He was just putting up a show for these fools. Michelangelo's relic was in his hands, so what if the statue was placed in the courtyard? The real mystery was the chest, which had a rune mana formation, though it had faded. Why did Sherlock disappear? Of course, it was due to the foolish Sherlock, who triggered the relic's protection trap and was killed. No, it was best not to kill him. Let him live a miserable life. Then, once Andrew obtained Michelangelo's relic, he could destroy Eternal Kingdom in front of Sherlock. He would then show the world that Andrew was the most powerful and popular superior devil. As for the Devil Management Committee's concern about dungeons in conflict, Andrew wasn't worried. If he had Michelangelo's relic, why would he be worried about the committee? When Michelangelo conquered the Underworld, did he care about the Devil Management Committee? Andrew looked at the residents that were examining the statue and felt pleased. He felt himself becoming the second Michelangelo. While Andrew was letting his imagination run wild, the statue emitted the brilliance of mana. Mana runes started appearing from the head of the statue all the way to the dungeon core main hall. The crowd started to panic, spreading out like waves. Even if the garrison guards wanted to maintain order, it was no use. Andrew looked at the chaotic situation and the mana runes that appeared on the statue. He panicked. What was happening? What was going on with the statue? There was no indication of mana, so why did it happen? What was it? Was it a scheme of Sherlock's? While Andrew was having wild thoughts, an orc ran over and shouted nervously, "Lord Andrew, bad news. Please take a look." Andrew left the speech platform and followed the orc to a room with a crystal ball. In the crystal ball was a dirty gnome who was wearing goggles on his head. He shouted in panic, "Dungeon Lord! The dungeon core is losing power rapidly." Mana runes appeared and covered the dungeon core. The rune mana formation is absorbing the energy of the dungeon core. What? Andrew couldn't believe it. The statue was absorbing the dungeon core's power? Rune mana formation? The rune mana formation on the statue? Andrew picked up the crystal ball and aimed it at the statue and the chaotic crowd as he said, "Are these the mana runes?" "That's right, Dungeon Lord. Those are the mana runes. We have to find the mana team to handle this situation. Within 3 days, the dungeon core's power will be exhausted," the gnome in the crystal ball shouted worriedly. "What? Exhausting the dungeon core within 3 days?" Andrew was scared stiff. His mind came up with various possibilities. His orc assistant quickly suggested, "Lord Andrew, I'll find the mana team to handle this." "Wait a moment." Andrew stopped the orc and pondered for a while. Then he said, "Don't call for the mana team. Seal the dungeon core main hall, arrest all the workers, and arrange for our creatures to take over." "Wait for a moment, Lord Andrew?" The orc didn't understand Andrew's strange order, but Andrew shouted at him, "Make haste and act according to my instructions. Seal all the news regarding the dungeon core. Don't let anyone know, and don't let anyone close to the dungeon core main hall or the dungeon lord main hall." "I understand, Lord Andrew." The orc nodded and carried out Andrew's order. Andrew looked at the panicking crowd and the statue that was shimmering with mana. He felt agitated and thought, "It's coming. Exhausting the power of the dungeon core within 3 days? How could Lord Sherlock do such a thing? This must be Michelangelo's mana. This is the key to accessing Michelangelo's relic. It must be this. Yes, this is it. A dungeon core could be bought using money, but this was Michelangelo's relic." Andrew clenched his fists. "Sherlock, just you wait. It's time for you to be jealous." Chapter 296, Drained Dungeon Core. In Eternal Kingdom Dungeon, Warriors, Sherlock stood at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall. With his height, he was able to watch over the gamers. He said, "At the other end of the teleport portal, our brothers in Winterfell are facing a huge crisis. The evil mana of the great devil Michelangelo is threatening Winterfell. We have to save Winterfell. I learned about this while I was missing for more than 10 days. There is no time to hesitate. Warriors, be prepared, a fierce battle awaits us." Sherlock looked at the time and said, "We'll set off in 2 days' time. We'll disperse now." Sherlock left the front of the Dungeon Lord main hall after his speech. Without the restraint of Sherlock, the gamers started discussing the plot. Winterfell is pitiful. It's involved in the new battle campaign scenario. Ha ha ha. Are we able to raid Winterfell again? I don't know. I hope so. I looted a lot of nice furniture last time. Gosh, you looted furniture? I was retrieving equipment, and the furniture was all looted by you. Sherlock was in the Dungeon Lord main hall, typing furiously on his keyboard. A table appeared behind Sherlock, and a computer screen and a computer processing unit were placed on the table. After Sherlock returned, he gifted it to Eggface to commend his heroic performance. After Brew pleaded with him 3 times. Though Eggface had his own computer and didn't have to fight with Sherlock over it or have the chance to harass Sherlock, Eggface wasn't able to use the computer anytime. Only 3 hours per day. Eggface objected vehemently. "Wait a moment, that's not what the computer said. It said that if I helped find you, I'd have unlimited bloody chrysanthemum tea and could play computer games every day." Sherlock said calmly, "Will bloody chrysanthemum tea ever run out? That's not quite possible, but..." "There are no buts. The bloody chrysanthemum tea will never run out if you have money. You're allowed to play computer games for 3 hours every day, that's pretty good." Eggface's objections were overruled. Eggface was easily placated. After complaining to himself while playing computer games, he became silent. Sherlock was creating a new post on the discussion forum. Dungeon. Eternal Kingdom, version 0.25 official update. Added new data, Michelangelo's relic. Thousands of years ago, there was a great superior devil, Michelangelo. He unified the entire underworld and gathered all the power of the underworld residents. Even the Devil Management Committee became his supporting tool. Michelangelo had the great ambition to conquer the heavenly kingdom. He led his immense dark army and the entire underworld in an unknown battle and lost. The age of the legend was no longer with us. There's no need to complete the unfinished work of Michelangelo in this new age. However, Michelangelo's relic appeared near Winterfell. The great Lord Sherlock obtained the inheritance of Michelangelo. A new crisis arose from the discovery of the relic and the foolishness of Andrew. Misfortune will befall Winterfell. Warriors, though Andrew is our enemy, Winterfell is innocent. The wealth of Winterfell must be spared from destruction. Take up your weapons. Help our weak neighbor. Added new mission. Battle preparation. To prepare for Winterfell's crisis, gamers will not be allowed to enter Winterfell until the start of the battle campaign scenario. Added new friendly NPC, Fallen Angel Lilo. She was a previous member of the Heavenly Kingdom. Because of her arrogance, she became a Hades fallen angel. She is a close friend of Sherlock and an important investor. I also stopped the work of the Adventurers Guild. Added new mission. Gather. All gamers are to gather in Eternal Kingdom within 3 days. The server will identify the gamer's locations after 3 days. Gamers who are not in Eternal Kingdom will suffer equipment and item loss. Sherlock checked his post before publishing. The next thing was to wait. For the past 3 days, Andrew didn't sleep. He opened his eyes widely and gazed intensely at the huge statue in the Dungeon Lord main hall. The facts showed that his guess was correct. From the statue's weak mana, Andrew was able to feel terror deep within his soul. The unfamiliar rune mana formation was absorbing power from the newly installed dungeon core. The energy of the dungeon core was drained within 3 days. Since yesterday, Winterfell had stopped providing mana. The Winterfell residents lived in darkness. Though the residents were against it, Andrew was obsessed with his great ambition, so he ignored them. As the statue gained more and more power, Andrew was able to interpret more than half of the rune mana formation, which was used to control the statue. The large statue must be one of Michelangelo's relics. The legend said that Michelangelo had 72 powerful superior devils as his assistants. Perhaps the statue was one of them. If he was able to unravel the secrets of the mana runes, he could control the statue. The chest could contain Michelangelo's relic and his power. Andrew was exhilarated. He was researching intensely when the large statue emitted loud booming sounds. An orc ran over and shouted at Andrew, "Dungeon Lord. The dungeon core has been drained." But Andrew ignored the orc. The gigantic statue lifted its leg. Chapter 297, A Human. A huge airship stopped outside Winterfell. It wasn't the first time Dragonborn came to Winterfell. He looked at the dark dungeon and felt nervous. The game environment was very realistic. "Prepare to land. Steady yourselves," shouted the mana engineer Yoda, who was at the helm controlling the airship. Dragonborn and the other gamers grabbed the railings nearby. Sherlock only chose a few hundred gamers to board the airship because it couldn't accommodate 2,000 gamers. Why did they not use the teleport portal to travel to Winterfell? Because all of the teleport portals stopped working after Winterfell lost its mana power. The rest of the gamers could teleport via the rune on the airship after it had landed. Dragonborn and the gamers on the airship would serve as the vanguard. The gamers disembarked after the airship landed and started building their base, which was constructed by placing rocks in a circle. The previously constructed base was demolished. But now, it was back. Lord Sherlock, Winterfell, looks different. When Sherlock disembarked from the airship, Bru's voice appeared in his mind. The power of the dungeon core was drained. It's normal that there is no illumination from mana. Sherlock didn't feel that it was strange. He knew what had happened in Winterfell. Lord Sherlock, you already planned for this. You let Andrew take away the statue so that it would drain the dungeon core's power. That will leave their defense system paralyzed. We'll let the gamers attack, then Winterfell will be ours. Bru said excitedly, we'll use the resources of Winterfell as our base for conquering the world. Then we'll begin the third beta test. With Winterfell's resources, we can afford tens of thousands of gamers and expand steadily. To be honest, I was depressed when you went missing for more than 10 days. I intended to carry out such retaliation, but you weren't around, and I couldn't perfect the plan. It's a pity. Since you're back, we'll take over Winterfell. What are you talking about? Sherlock wasn't as excited as Bru. He looked at the quiet dungeon and said, we aren't invaders. Instead of launching battle after battle, don't you think doing business and giving favors are better? Moreover, our goal isn't as small as Winterfell. Warriors of Eternal Kingdom, Sherlock exerted his dominance to restrain the gamers. He then shouted to the excited gamers, saying, "I don't know what you will face later. However, the relic of the great conqueror won't be simple. You'll sacrifice and die, but remember, you're doing it for the underworld and peace. Follow me, warriors. Don't be nervous or fearful, because you're fighting for your dream." The gamers were no longer restrained, and they started shouting. For the equipment, for the furniture, for Dragon Raja, DMN the scoundrels of Dragon Raja. We, the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance, will kill you. Wah! The excited gamers followed behind Sherlock and marched towards the deathly quiet Winterfell. Dragonborn, Take a Spearhead, and Sealhead Ling Chong were in the contingent. The battle campaign scenario was in Winterfell. However, the enemy had changed from the ancient gods' believers to the great conqueror Michelangelo. To be precise, it was his relic. Whatever it was, the gamers always had loot after each battle. This was no exception. When the gamers arrived at the gate of Winterfell, they found something strange. There was nobody in Winterfell, only numerous stone statues. There were various stone statues. Some were walking, some were standing, and some were opening their mouths to eat. It was as though they were turned to stone instantaneously. "What's up? Is Medusa here?" Take a Spearhead surveyed the strange statues. Once they entered Winterfell, they didn't follow Sherlock. Instead, they looted the surrounding shops. Like the stone statues on the streets, the shops were turned to stone, including the furniture. Take a Spearhead wanted to carry the furniture, but the stones seemed to grow out from the ground. No matter how they tried, they couldn't carry them. Using the weapons to hack only left noticeable marks. More and more gamers ran around. After discovering that they couldn't loot, they returned to Sherlock in disappointment. Sherlock didn't stop the gamers. Sherlock wasn't concerned about the petrification. He walked towards the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. Inside, everything was petrified like the stone buildings outside. There were petrified gnomes, werewolves, and orcs who were in a panic. From the Dungeon Lord main hall, Sherlock noticed that the petrified passers-by on the streets were looking at the Dungeon Lord main hall. Outside the Dungeon Lord main hall was a pile of fragmented rocks. It was as though a huge rock was smashed. The gamers were talking incessantly. They hadn't seen any enemies, and they couldn't carry any loot. It was like they were watching plot scenery along the way. "Seems like we have a guest." A stone throne was placed at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall. A figure was sitting on the throne. Beside the figure was a petrified superior devil with devil wings, Andrew. Andrew looked proud and excited. From the art perspective, it was a superior statue. Sitting on the stone throne was a human. Chapter 298. Devil King of Fury. There was a human in the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. It was like a devil appearing in a surface chapel. The human had a weathered face, and he was wearing a normal set of white clothing. If he was thrown in with the gray stone statues, it would be impossible to figure him out. Even the gamers knew that he wasn't simple. "I thought Andrew would be a boss, but he's now part of the backdrop of a scene." That's hilarious. The game officials are so mean to Andrew. He has a tough character, yet he can't be a boss in the instance dungeon. No, a statue can also be part of an instance dungeon. The game officials must hate Andrew a lot. If we complete the instance dungeon, will Andrew be saved? Definitely. We are the heroes that are here to defeat the evil characters and save Winterfell. Yes, we depend on them to complement us as heroes. If the NPCs in Winterfell are all dead, who's going to complement us? Are you fools? Just replacing all of the dead NPCs will do. That sounds logical. It was a grave situation, but the gamers behind Sherlock weren't in the mood. They were chattering non-stop in front of the human. The human looked more and more annoyed. "Is that an insult, Sherlock?" The human stood up and walked towards Sherlock as he asked, "Are your green-skinned creatures here to humiliate me?" The gamers were dumbstruck. They reminded each other to keep quiet. "Shush. Stop talking. Be immersive." That's awesome. Is the plot created in real time based on NPC interactivity? Sherlock exerted his dominance so that the gamers were unable to speak. Then, he looked casually at the human and said, "Green-skinned creatures? They look green, but they aren't normal creatures. They are the Underworld's bravest warriors and the citizens of Eternal Kingdom. They will stop you, Samael. Whatever schemes you have, they will stop you. When did you discover me?" The human didn't appear shocked, and he said, "Seeing your reaction, you must have taken Michelangelo's relic. Where is it? Who knows? Do you want to try capturing and interrogating me? Perhaps I will tell. Sherlock smiled. A huge rock smashed into the side of Sherlock and cracked as though it hit a wall. The flying rock fragments fell to the ground like a mist. Sherlock smiled as he stood, unmoving, at his location, a transparent shield flashing by him. Samael tilted his head. Behind him, orcs, werewolves, and even vampires with strange pupils walked out from the sinister dungeon lord main hall and the streets. Their distorted faces were flattened as though they were walking serpents. Kill all of them. Hissing sounds came from Samael's mouth. Those strange creatures came from all directions and charged at Sherlock and the gamers. A mission notice appeared before the gamers. Mission title: The Battle Against Samael. Mission description: one of the devil kings from Hades, Samael, has been spreading plague and is now going after Michelangelo's relic. He has a plan to conquer the world. As a citizen of Eternal Kingdom, you have to stop him. Only we can conquer the world. Defeat the servants of Samael and stop him. Mission reward: the rewards will be based on the number of enemies killed. The highest reward is a piece of legendary equipment. There was a huge list of mission rewards, which caused the gamers to scream. For Eternal Kingdom Dungeon, for Lord Sherlock, for the equipment, for the reputation points. Wah hhhhhhh. The gamers charged at the strange creatures, and a chaotic battle ensued. Samael didn't expect the gamers to be courageous. They didn't know what Samael meant, because the green-skinned creatures weren't fearful. I must admit that your green-skinned creatures are pretty strong. However, they can't save you, Sherlock. Samael stood up from the throne. His lone, vulnerable, and weak body walked towards the tall Sherlock. Samael, if you return to Hades, I'll pretend nothing happened, Sherlock negotiated with a solemn tone. Do you know what you sound like? The repulsive and pretentious Metatron, Samael said in disgust. You should kneel down to me and beg for mercy. Sherlock, I will forgive your sins and let you be the vanguard in my conquest of the heavenly kingdom. I can understand why Metatron expelled you from the heavenly kingdom, Sherlock nodded and said seriously. Don't mention Metatron. Never ever again mention his name in front of me. The mana around Samael congealed as pebbles floated up by his side. He walked towards Sherlock and said, the mysterious young Sherlock, let me take a look. Are you really as powerful as Satan said? I'm a peace lover, but if you must fight. Sherlock pinched his fingers and said, I'll help Metatron beat you to death. To be honest, I haven't killed one of the 7 devil kings. Before Sherlock fought with Samael, the gamers shouted. Gosh, the dialogue is awesome. Our Shirley's background isn't simple. Even Satan said he's powerful. Nonsense. In World of Warcraft, which Lord Overseer isn't awesome? That sounds logical. Wah. Chapter 299. Battle begins. Black veins appeared on Samael's face. The rock fragments by his sides started rolling. They were statue fragments from when they cracked. The rolling rock fragments gathered and formed a huge rock serpent. The huge rock serpent emitted a booming sound and smashed against Sherlock. Dragonborn used his shield to fend off a gnome's body. The gnome opened his huge, terrifying mouth and spat his forked tongue at Dragonborn's neck, but it was a bit too short. Take a spear stabbed the gnome's neck with his pike and flung him away. The strange thing was that the killed enemies climbed up as though nothing had happened. The gnome, whose neck was stabbed, pounced forward and strangled Takeaspirhit's neck. The pike pierced through the gnome's neck, but he seemed all right. Attack their heads. Someone shouted before using a short sword to decapitate the gnome. Blood splattered on Takeaspirhit's body, and he was covered with a mixture of grotesque blood and body liquids. That's like a zombie. Ooh. Before the gamer finished his words, he was stabbed in the heart by the headless zombie. It was a gruesome death, and he had to revive. Mince them. Take a spear, shouted loudly. He slung his pike on his back and fastened it with a rope. He then took out his backup steel blade and roared. Nobody responded to him, they were busy fighting the monsters. Brother Pants, if we don't fight the monsters in the plot, there won't be any rewards. While most of the gamers were fighting Samael's troops, Not Wearing Pants had climbed on the roof of a petrified house. He noticed a battle nearby and heard peasants' shouts. Not Wearing Pants hollered, "You go ahead first, peasant. I'll capture some screenshots. Shirley is participating in the plot." Look at the vicious fighting. Boom, boom, boom. The huge stone serpent used its tail to whip maliciously at Sherlock. A huge pit appeared at the whipped location. Not wearing pants wasn't able to see inside the pit, but that didn't stop him from capturing screenshots. The tail of the huge serpent was raised very high. As it was about to smash down, the serpent discovered that there was a huge pit at its tail, as well as fissures that looked like spider webs spreading out. Your head is harder than a rock. Samael advanced closer as mana accumulated at his palm. He held a black pike with a spiral engraved shaft, and poisonous bile was applied at the tip of the pike. A gray aura of death emanated from Samael as he edged closer. Did you support the previous army of the ancient gods? Let me guess your reward. They helped you find Michelangelo's relic? Or helped to open the gates of hell so that you can enter the underworld and surface world? Sherlock clenched his fists, speaking calmly. After the failed attempt, you started the plague in Winterfell and tempted Andrew into finding Michelangelo's relic? Andrew? Is that the name of the superior devil? A believer of Satan who was full of original sin. Jealousy? Sometimes, jealousy is more sinful than fury. He was a good candidate for manipulation. Samael flipped the pike and rested it on his arm. His stride emitted gray ripples that spread on the ground. I only need Michelangelo's relic, but you robbed me of it. I had to drain Winterfell's dungeon core. It's your fault for causing the downfall of Winterfell. It's my honor. Sherlock smiled and said, I committed another hateful sin. Boom. The stone serpent smashed at Sherlock, but he gave the snake a strong punch. Time froze as the fist and stone serpent collided. Then there was a violent explosion of blinding light. A series of three-layered mana formations appeared at Sherlock's fist and expanded, and a magical vortex wrapped around the stone serpent. The stone serpent exploded instantly, and the fragments flew in all directions. Samael's pike shimmered with rays of death. Samael wielded the pike and pushed through the fragments of the exploding stone serpent. He aimed the sharp tip of the pike at Sherlock's heart, but Sherlock dodged. There was a continuous series of pike afterimages that surrounded Sherlock's body. Samael's pike spun out a web of death, and Sherlock looked like a dancer on the web. The dance of death didn't last long, as Sherlock took an opportunity to punch at Samael's face. Samael was distorted, and he flew back with great force, knocking into a petrified building and leaving a long ditch. Is he dead, Lord Sherlock? Brew asked impatiently. He's not dead yet. Sherlock shook his head and raised his fist. A dark liquid was eroding the skin of his fist with a sizzling sound. This is tricky, Lord Sherlock. We started our small dungeon less than half a year ago, but now you're challenging one of the Devil Kings, Samael. This seems like a big jump. Are you going to die? Brew was worried. Don't exaggerate. He's not the real body of Samael. The power of Winterfell's dungeon core isn't sufficient for Samael to pass through the gates of hell. Sherlock said, but things aren't optimistic. We're waiting for reinforcements. Reinforcements? Lord Sherlock, you have a backup plan? Samael stood up among the ruins in his tattered clothing. Part of his head was flattened, and his face was grotesquely distorted. His back started to bulge enormously. Then there was tearing of the flesh. A pair of black feathered wings tore out and splattered dark liquid on the ground. The black wings flapped a few times. Then, Samael held onto his wings and shrugged his shoulders. He bared his sharp teeth at Sherlock and smiled. Chapter 300. Damage inflicted by the gamers. Arthur's sword penetrated a gnome's head, but it didn't stop his movement. Peasant hacked with his great axe to destroy the gnome's body and immobilize him. Though the gamers were fighting violent battles and occasionally used mana skills that created pom sounds, it was a far cry from the battle at the side. At the Dungeon Lord main hall, Sherlock and Samael were locked in a vicious battle. The frequent crashing of buildings made loud impact sounds. A series of mana formations appeared in the sky, and crimson lasers covered the ground, followed by sequential explosions. Pom, boom, clank, such sound effects were heard. I'm full of praises. I'm going to give the special effects full marks. Not wearing pants climbed down from the buildings. He was clean since he hadn't engaged in battle. Arthur was covered in blood, but he hadn't died yet. Many gamers had perished once. Yoda flew the airship to Winterfell. Once the gamers revived on the airship, they could have unlimited replenishment of troops. It's not good to continue fighting. We have to kill the boss. The minions will keep coming. Burning Chesthair, who was covered in wounds, wielded a pair of daggers. His breastplate had a gaping hole that required extensive repair. He said excitedly, "Quick, Pants, gather all of our guild members. Leave the minions to individual gamers and other guilds. Let's fight the boss." "Gosh, fight the boss?" Not Wearing Pants pushed down on Burning Chesthair's head and pointed to Sherlock, who was fighting within the ruins. "How do you fight the boss in that kind of a battle? Don't we need to perish tens of times when we fight with a boss in all online games?" Burning Chesthair said. Arthur nodded his head as he said, "Yes, I think Chesthair makes sense." Not Wearing Pants didn't rebuke Arthur. He went to call for other guild members. There were numerous servants of Samael, but they couldn't be compared to the unlimited revivals of the gamers. Tens of members of the Pioneer Alliance were redeployed such that they didn't affect the outcome of the battle. A strange thing occurred. The outer circle was formed by 1,000 gamers. They fought with Samael's servants, who came from all directions. Nearby was Sherlock and Samael having an immortal battle. The beta gamers of the Pioneer Alliance were outside the circle, preparing to engage the boss. They were sharpening weapons, distributing food, and discussing combat tactics. The most important thing was combat tactics. In this game, there was only one way to fight a boss. That was to arrange more than 10 tanks to distract the boss while DPS inflicted as much damage as possible from behind the boss at a distance. As for close combat DPS, they waited for opportunities to conduct suicide attacks. The tanks stripped all of their armor and were only armed with shields. Peasant stripped himself bare. Even his weapons were on the ground. He was only armed with a shield. Yoda was on the airship, gaping in astonishment. The gamers weren't bothered. It was understandable for NPCs to become dazed once in a while. Peasant took up a large kite shield that was the size of a gnome. He was naked as he shouted, "Let's go. I'll go first." Sherlock and Samael were still locked in a vicious battle. Sherlock had to sustain the mana to revive the dying gamers as he deflected Samael's incessant attacks. After a pair of featherless wings sprouted from his back, Samael's combat power had risen to a new level. The spiraling black pike that had black mana hit at Sherlock's body. A mana-filled rune shield blocked the stabbing of the black pike. The rune shield appeared in Sherlock's hand instantly, deflecting Samael's attacks. "Sherlock, do consider my suggestion. If you hand over Michelangelo's relic, I'll let you off, and you'll be my loyal servant. I'll open the gates of hell completely and teach those who bragged about." Samael opened his mouth, which was filled with long, sharp teeth, and opened his crimson eyes. He discussed his plan excitedly with Sherlock. He was interrupted by a small voice coming from his back. Because the power was so small, Samael could almost ignore it. But he forgot he was in a human's body. Jab! An arrow landed on Samael's wing, which had only a few black feathers. Black liquid flowed out and eroded the arrowhead, and the arrow shaft fell to the ground. However, there was a wound on Samael's wing. Samael turned his head and saw a naked gnome who was wielding a kite shield and another armored gnome who held a short bow. That was the gnome that shot him. The other naked gnomes shouted excitedly. "That was awesome, Sister Vannas. Cool. I thought you were going to kill Shirley with your arrow. That's fantastic." Sister Vannas did practice archery daily. The rise of the archers starts with Sister Vannas. The gamers whistled while Sylvanas raised her short bow and fired at Samael's face. The bowstring emitted a swoosh sound. An arrow flew past Samael's wing and missed. "It's all right, Sister Vannas, buck up. Let me try." "Gosh, don't shoot Shirley." The gamers chattered noisily, and Samael was exploding with fury. When he was shot by these low, weak, and stupid green-skinned creatures, his rationale was almost overwhelmed by rage. Samael didn't have the chance to kill those gamers. While Samael was distracted, Sherlock grabbed his hair and smashed him against the ground. At the same time, Sherlock raised his other fist and smashed hard onto the back of Samael's skull. The gamers charged, ready to inflict maximum damage. Chapter 301. Grandson. Peasant felt his heartbeat thumping faster. Though it was a game, he had normal physiological reactions. 10 other gamers who were tanks were in place. Lord Sherlock had grabbed Samael's skull and was smashing it into the ground. A ray of light shot out from where Sherlock was smashing and sent Shirley flying out. It's now. This is our chance. The gamers thought that it was a new stage of the boss fight. Peasant charged forward. In the pit smashed out by Sherlock's fist, the bloody Samael stood up. A few naked gnomes with shields walked over and shouted vulgarities. DMNU, grandson, I'm your dad, you silly dude, hit me, come and hit me, catch me, and I'll give you some intelligence syrup. Wah! Samael's clothing was completely destroyed. His damaged flesh and muscles were vibrating, and his wounds sealed up. His body looked lacerated. Samael emitted black mana as he opened his mouth and bellowed in a non-human voice. Roar! With his bellow, his mouth was opened in an exaggerated manner. Even his cheeks were torn into shreds. The charging gamers stopped in their tracks at this terrifying scene, but after a pause, they continued their charging. Samael widened his stance and aimed his pike at the gamers. A figure flashed by and hit Samael's body. Sherlock's knee smashed into Samael's chest, then he raised his sandbag fist and pummeled Samael's face. The gamers were now beside Samael. The tanks weren't of much use as Sherlock had restrained Samael under him. The close combat DPS gamers charged in and inflicted as much damage as possible. Horizontal slash, berserker strike, horizontal slash, berserker strike. The double dagger burning chest hair rolled to Samael's side. He stabbed in a frenzy at Samael's upper body as though he was drawing an intricate picture. Compared to burning chest hair's ineffective attacks, Peasant's attack was more powerful. Peasant stabbed deeply into Samael's ribs with his pike. The shaft was immediately dissolved by the black liquid. Samael was bleeding. The weapons of the gamers were corroded once they touched Samael's body. The better the quality of the weapon, the less the corrosion. The gamers inflicted damage in a frenzy while Sherlock held down Samael. Then, Samael bellowed so furiously that the gamers scampered away. Samael got up. The boss was extremely powerful. Without Lord Sherlock, none of the close combat DPS dared to get near him. Close combat DPS, retreat. Ranged DPS, attack. Tanks, get ready. Ranged DPS, don't injure Shirley, the commanding not wearing pants shouted. The close combat DPS retreated rapidly, and a volley of arrows was fired. Sylvanas and the archers shot arrows at Samael at a fast pace. Samael was facing a pincer attack from Sherlock and the gamers. The damage inflicted by the gamers was negligible, but the harassment was effective. Samael's muscles bulged out. He wanted to deflect Sherlock's attacks, but he was unable to focus his attention on Sherlock. While Sherlock and the gamers were damaging Samael, the muscles on his body became larger and larger. The serpent-faced servants who were fighting the gamers collapsed to the ground, their blood flowing towards Samael. Some gamers attempted to stop the blood, but they failed unless they had jars with them. Some gamers even attempted to drink the blood, but it flowed out from their buttocks and proceeded towards Samael. The restrained Samael exploded with a ton of energy, forcing Sherlock to back up. Samael then sucked in all the blood flowing towards him. The blood streams accumulated in Samael's body. The archers fired arrows at Samael, but the arrows didn't have their previous damage. Samael's body became distorted after the accumulation of the blood and the expansion of his muscles. A second bald wing sprouted out from his shoulder with a loud tearing sound. Samael's aura became more dominant with the growth of the second wing. Gosh, Lord Sherlock, your superhuman punch isn't effective against Samael, Bruce said worriedly. Shall we try the magic cannons? I'm curious as to why we didn't use the magic cannons and why you prohibited the gamers from using them. If you're worried about draining mana, as long as the cannons are able to blow Samael into smithereens, it will be worth it. Don't worry, I'm still in control of the situation, said Sherlock as he observed the expanding Samael. The two bald wings started to become black, and feathers started appearing. Sherlock pondered for a while and said, more or less. After his transformation, Samael flapped his wings and shot into the sky. The huge black wings extended in the air. Then, he dove at the gamers. His goal was to annihilate them. Tanks, prepare for battle. Not wearing pants shouted. At the same time, Peasant came forward and braced himself courageously against the diving Samael as he shouted, grandson. Chapter 302. Because of this. Samael charged into the gamers like a wolf in a herd of sheep. He swung his pike wildly while he contemplated trapping the souls of the gamers before torturing them viciously. He wanted to see them tortured and in pain. He wanted them to be like ants and give up their dignity before pleading for mercy. Samael came up with millions of ways to torture them. First of all, he wanted to have a taste of their fear. Samael had seen fear in those pathetic mortals before. As such, he didn't kill all of them. After diving, he stomped the naked gnome that called him grandson to death. Then, he grabbed the double dagger gnome that tried to retreat. Samael intended to slowly squeeze him to death. The gnome was panicking, but he wasn't fearful like Samael had anticipated. Instead, the gnome wildly stabbed at him. The gnome, burning chest hair, was strangled by Samael, and his face turned maroon. However, he used his remaining breath to shout, horizontal slash, berserker strike, horizontal slash, berserker strike. A gnome below shouted, chest hair is dead. I told you not to pull his aggro. Fight without shouting nonsense. All DPS retreat. Don't die. Throw your weapons to a convenient spot before dying. The group of gamers dispersed and moved with military precision. Two of the gamers hopped and executed a 360-degree somersault. Samael didn't understand why they did that. The flea-like green-skinned creatures dispersed rapidly, so Samael wasn't able to kill all of them. Samael pulverized the gnome that he held in his hand and threw the lifeless body to the ground. Samael then walked towards the gnome that was shouting. The boss was chasing after an OT gamer after killing his previous target. As for the pulling of aggro, DMN, aggro is determined according to the loudness of one's voice? That's cracking me up. Pants, you're dead. Pants, the boss is coming for you. Laugh all you like. Pull the aggro of the boss. Not wearing pants fled while he shouted. The fact was that he had nowhere to run. The naked tank gamers charged at Samael, shouting at him. Tonight, your mom will die. I'll let your mom wear reviving armor and then kill her twice. The tall boss is hot on your trail. Gosh, what does that mean? Chasing after the sun. Hui is hot on your trail. Shooting the sun? How about the Titanic? What about the creator goddess? Is that good? If there are storm and wind, we'll rule the world. That's hilarious, you silly dudes. Where did you learn all of these? Ha 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 ha. If you're not a learned person, you can't fight monsters. I've learned a lot in online games. Why are all of you so low class? The gamers were shouting vulgarities at Samael to pull his aggro. Though Samael was initially going after not wearing pants, after hearing their insults, though he couldn't understand some of the words and he didn't have a mom, he was infuriated. Samael turned his head and swept his pike. He killed the gamers who were within his attack radius. However, the gamers were still smiling merrily. They weren't fearful at all. They were extremely happy and exhilarated. Those dead gamers vanished into mana trails in the air. Then, a replacement came in and continued to taunt Samael. When Samael decided to kill off all the gamers, Sherlock walked back. His clothes were tattered, but he wasn't seriously wounded. Sherlock walked towards Samael and said, "You can't defeat us. I have the bravest warriors in the underworld. Even without me, they'll stop you." Are you referring to these green-skinned creatures? If you think these dirty little creatures can stop me, forget about it. Kneel down and yield to me, Sherlock. Samael spread out his hands as though he was announcing his victory. His power continued to expand, and his shoulders bulged. With dark liquid oozing out, a pair of black wings sprouted out. Samael had 4 wings fully extended out. With the addition of the new wings, his power seemed to have increased to a new level. Black feathers shed gradually to the ground. Samael looked up and put his claws on top of his head. A powerful blow landed on the side of Samael's head, and he flew out. He was pinned against the nearby wall. The wall had radial cracks expanding from where Samael's huge body was pinned by a long black pike, which he was dangling from. The pike, which emitted a black aura, penetrated Samael's head and drove deep into the wall. Samael was in pain, and black mist seeped out from his eyes, nose, and mouth. Soon, he vanished. Samael's pike disintegrated gradually, while the 4 wings behind his back withered and dissolved. Sherlock, was this your plan? By releasing Samael, were you intending to create a ruckus? A slender figure in a tutu skirt stood on the pike. Compared to the humongous body of Samael, Lilo's body was extremely petite. A pair of shiny black wings extended from Lilo's back, and the brilliance of mana emanated from her. Of course not. Sherlock smiled as he gazed at Lilo and pointed to the dissolving Samael. A large and precious pearl fell to the ground and was covered with grit. I did everything for this. That is the key to conquering the Heavenly Kingdom, Lilo. Chapter 303, Compensation. Winterfell had encountered another historical disaster. The Merchant Alliance investigated Samael's invasion from the beginning to the end and obtained Andrew's voluntary explanation. He had recovered from the petrification, and the truth was unraveled. Andrew was a pawn in Samael's plan. Samael's main aim was to accumulate enough power from Michelangelo's relic to manifest his body from the spirit world to the underworld. His sinister plan was wrecked by the brave Lord Sherlock and his courageous warriors. What about the trial of Samael? The Merchant Alliance didn't have such power. After discussing the matter and filing complaints with the Devil Management Committee, the Merchant Alliance planned to stage protests and objections to the spirit world. Devil Kings were also devils, and they needed to earn a living. They couldn't possibly turn a blind eye to these protests. Not all Devil Kings were obsessed with conquering the world and attacking the Heavenly Kingdom. For example, Lucifer was more cultured and responsible. He was the role model for the Devil Kings. After receiving the strong protests from the Merchant Alliance, Lucifer investigated the incident. He had afternoon tea with Samael and then sent a Hades envoy to the Merchant Alliance. After some discussion, they came to a resolution. We'll release all of the souls of the Winterfell residents who perished in this incident. They can go home without worry. For humanitarian reasons, we'll compensate each family with 20 magic stones for their mental anguish. The Grim Reaper, who was wearing a black hood, reported to a circle of Winterfell senior managers, a Merchant Alliance special envoy, reporters, and Lord Sherlock. We're thankful for Satan's concern for Winterfell. We know this was purely an accident. As Dungeon Lord Andrew was imprisoned, Baron Nicholas became the steward of Winterfell. He was an old friend of Sherlock. What about the losses of Eternal Kingdom? Nicholas gestured politely at Sherlock, while Sherlock nodded courteously at the Grim Reaper in acknowledgement. Please provide a detailed account of the casualties, the Grim Reaper said as he tapped on the table. 100,000 casualties. What? I said, 100,000 dead. Sherlock calmly took out a thick report. There were a few photographs that depicted the gruesome deaths of the gamers. In consideration of the effects on the public, the critical areas were covered by mosaics. The reporters picked up their mana devices and snapped pictures in a frenzy. Sherlock pointed at the report and said, "Take a look. We are speaking with data. When Eternal Kingdom discovered something was amiss, we hurried to Winterfell immediately. I won't elaborate on the events. We tried to protect Winterfell, but we weren't Samael's match." Sherlock pulled back his sleeves and revealed his lacerated arm. He said, "Besides the stated number of deaths, Samael caused irreversible harm to me. The wound penetrated the upper layer of my skin. I went for a professional medical checkup, and the physician recommended an immediate amputation. This is my medical report." Sherlock placed the report with the label, "Fatality Hospital," on the table. Many of the creatures present gasped in astonishment and pity. "That's unfortunate." While the Grim Reaper examined the medical report, Sherlock nodded and said, "I'm quite easygoing. I'll lose an arm at most. However, my servants suffered heavy casualties during the battle. They were all successful professionals with their own families. He is one of them." Sherlock picked up a photograph that depicted a double-dagger gnome with a broken neck, who was lying dead on the ground. Sherlock continued explaining, his alias was Chest Hair. He was the bravest warrior in Eternal Kingdom. He is survived by 2 mothers and fathers, 30 brothers and sisters, and 4 pairs of grandfathers and grandmothers. He also left behind 50 children. Now his family has lost a grandson, a son, a husband, and a father. All of this was caused by Samael. I'm not blaming Samael or objecting to the spirit world's system of the Devil Kings. I know that this system has been in effect for millions of years, and I can't deny the contributions of the 7 Devil Kings to society. However, in my dungeon, there are 100,000 cases similar to that of Chesthair. They have to obtain compensation. Hades will release their souls." Sherlock interrupted the Grim Reaper and said, "Apologies, their souls were destroyed by Samael using a special method. They are permanently dead. I managed to record a precious video before they passed on. It will be sufficient to explain everything. Sherlock took out a round adamantine rock and showed the images within. Thousands of gamers perished in the battle, and numerous gamers rushed out from the teleport portal and charged onto the battlefield. Samael was grabbing Burning Chesthair's throat, strangling him to his death. The images stopped. Sherlock was shedding tears upon seeing the vicious bloodbath. The situation became extremely awkward. I understand. I'll go back and do a detailed study. I'll give you a satisfactory answer. The Grim Reaper nodded. Let's move on to the next topic, Nicholas said. When Sherlock walked out of the conference hall, he saw a carriage stopping by the roadside. The door of the carriage opened, and a hamster peered out. He waved at Sherlock. Sherlock walked over and got inside the carriage. The hamster closed the carriage door. Lilo was sitting in the carriage. She was wearing a detailed and intricate floral lace skirt, and her hands were covered with lace gloves. Can I take a look at that precious pearl? You said that it was the key to conquering the Heavenly Kingdom, Lilo said. Chapter 304. Sherlock's Plan. No problem. Sherlock took out a precious white pearl and said, due to time constraints, I'll omit the background information and other nonsense. Simply put, this is called the Doppelganger Precious Pearl, and it's what allowed Samael to walk out of the spirit world. It isn't very useful to anyone aside from Devil Kings that want to get out of the spirit world. However, if we use this item as an intermediary station for the Underworld, we can invade the surface world a few hundred years in advance. Invade the surface world? That's correct, Sherlock said firmly. Without a huge army, we'll be surrounded by humans if we invade the surface world. With the Doppelganger Precious Pearl, we can set up a dungeon core on the surface world and expand our dungeon. The most important thing is that we can recruit the surface world's races. Recruit humans and fairies? Lilo asked. What has this got to do with the conquest of the Heavenly Kingdom? The surface world has a lot of resources that we need, and it's all easy to obtain. It's not practical for the underworld races to maneuver within the surface world. By using the surface world races, we can obtain the resources easily. We can plant herbs that can't be cultivated in the underworld. We can obtain rare ores and clay that has sunshine flavor. The hot and spicy flavored clay will definitely be popular with the underworld races. Sherlock spoke excitedly, but Lilo calmly responded, I'm only hearing of a merchant's crude plan of earning money. It's not what I'm interested in, which is the conquest of the Heavenly Kingdom. No, you have a misunderstanding of the conquest of Heavenly Kingdom, Lilo. Sherlock shook his head and said, if you want to conquer the Heavenly Kingdom, what do you need? Manpower and equipment. It all requires magic stones. Earning money is our first step towards defeating the Heavenly Kingdom. You are now making sense. Lilo nodded and pondered for a while. I have another matter for you to consider, Sherlock said solemnly. I intend to build the surface world dungeon in the near future. I'll assign 5,000 citizens to enter the surface world cities and work. Eternal Kingdom has to expand. With the reward from the Merchant Alliance and the compensation from the spirit world, I'll be busy negotiating the terms. Therefore, I'll be unable to manage the surface world affairs. The dungeon core also requires a large amount of mana. Wait, I can understand what you've said. As for the mana supply, isn't your mana pool sufficient? Even the most common superior devil is able to supply mana to a dungeon with 100,000 citizens. Lilo frowned as she asked. No, the situation is different. The main area for supplying mana isn't the dungeon. When the time comes, you'll know, Sherlock said vaguely. Lilo didn't ask any further. For the construction of the surface world stronghold, Sherlock intended to spend time discussing it with Lilo. It wasn't easy to understand the details in a short time. Sherlock had to return to the conference hall and continue the discussion regarding the reward and compensation. Blacksmith Simba was very busy recently. With the commissioning of the large furnace, he taught countless apprentices. But those green-skinned creatures preferred to approach him to repair equipment. Also, only Simba could help to improve the equipment. Dang! Simba hammered down violently. He looked at the repaired equipment and threw it to the gnome in front. He shouted at the long queue outside, it's my rest time. Come back tomorrow. Oh, it's only 1 o'clock in the morning. Are you closing that early today? I've just started doing my daily mission. Please don't do this. The gamers complained, but the experienced Simba was unmoved. He almost smiled with satisfaction. Simba returned to his house, and his cousin Mufasa and skills trainer Moros brought bloody chrysanthemum tea over. It wasn't the first time they had visited Simba. They quickly found a place to sit down. Simba lit up metal sticks and passed them out. Z, Z, Z. Moros puffed on his metal stick, and green smoke rose up. Did you hear about it in the meeting yesterday? The dungeon is recruiting again. This time, it's increasing to 5,000 creatures. It's scary. Lord Sherlock started from 100 and rose to 5,000 creatures within such a short time. How did he do it? Mufasa was full of admiration. Let him recruit. We'll just do our jobs properly. Simba smoked his metal stick while he adjusted the tools in his hands in preparation for tomorrow's work. Yes, how's Beast doing? Moros asked in a low voice. Still the same, but I heard that his father-in-law chased him out because he knew about Andrew's conspiracy. Simba whispered, if that's the case, Dungeon Lord Onionhead was protecting Beast. Mufasa also whispered, who knows? According to Brainiac, a powerful creature like Samael is able to threaten Onionhead easily. Simba puffed out smoke and said, regardless, it's not related to us. The recent incidents have been scary. Moros shook his head. My wife asked if I'm the instructor of those heroes, and I'm embarrassed. What? My mom asked me the same question. Mufasa was surprised. Simba didn't say anything. He turned his head to look out the window. The green-skinned creatures were busy carrying bricks. They were excavating new lands in preparation for the coming of new members. Who would have thought that these normal-looking but insane green-skinned creatures would save Winterfell 3 times? Chapter 305. New Faction. The gamers were unhappy. It was mainly due to the few benefits gained from the second Winterfell battle campaign. During the first Winterfell battle campaign, the gamers could raid the entire Dungeon Lord main hall and a few of the shops. Though the number of shops raided was small relative to Winterfell, it was a bountiful haul. Some gamers were able to sell their loot to NPCs at very good prices. In the battle with the Ancient Gods believers, the gamers also obtained considerable loot, including the equipment of the armored NPCs. In conclusion, the first Winterfell battle campaign was a fruitful battle for the gamers. This time, the gamers didn't receive good rewards because the entire dungeon was petrified. Besides the seemingly invincible Samael, who looked like the Thing, there were no other enemies. As such, there was no loot or equipment for salvaging. After defeating Samael, the petrification subsided gradually. While the gamers were able to transport some materials from Winterfell, they didn't obtain practical benefits. The gamers were still unhappy even after they were awarded the title of Winterfell Warrior. If the gamers weren't allowed to loot Winterfell, they would feel cheated. As there were no official contact channels or complaint avenues, the gamers could only vent their frustration on the discussion forum. The gamers wanted to apply pressure on the game officials to show their unhappiness, but Dungeon didn't have channels to top up their accounts. If they filed official complaints, it would be useless as the gamers didn't spend any money. However, it didn't mean that the gamers didn't spend money in Dungeon. The rich gamers had spent up to a 5-figure sum. As for rage quitting, when someone suggested it, there was overwhelming support. Please, I beg all of you to rage quit. Please give me the beta tester status before quitting. I'm willing to pay less than 10,000 renminbi. I only hope that China will have fewer people when I cram into public transit, go shopping in malls, and wait for Dungeon beta tester status. If you are willing to quit the game and create a higher chance for me to succeed, I will be grateful to you. I'm not quitting the game because of my son. Even though the discussion was held fervently on the forum, nobody quit the game. Instead, the number of online Dungeon gamers reached full capacity. Sherlock wasn't bothered as he was busy collecting rewards and compensation. Sherlock also modified the doppelganger precious pearl so that he could integrate it with brew. After that, he would be able to bring the modified doppelganger precious pearl to the surface world to do experiments. He was going to set up a subsidiary base on the surface world. Before that, he had to publish the official announcement for the third beta testing. Version 0.3 update. Dear gamers, greetings. It has been half a year. We progressed from 101st beta gamers to the current 2000 gamers. I believe the 2000 seats are unable to satisfy the gamers. We are commencing the third batch of beta testing and sending out 8,000 additional activation codes and virtual reality gaming capsules. Gamers can register on the official website for the third beta test within 3 days. The previous beta gamer statuses are still valid. The following are the updates for version 0.3. We added new gameplay, factions. In this world, we aren't limited to the Underworld residents. At specific locations, there will be teleport portals that connect to the surface world. The surface world will not sit back and do nothing when they sense the development of Eternal Kingdom. A city, Victoria, is watching the movements of the Underworld. We will be adding 2 factions, Eternal Kingdom and Victoria. The factions represent the dark Underworld and the sunny surface world. A long history of hatred prevents both sides from maintaining lasting peace. However, the future is unpredictable. Whether it's a win-win collaborative situation or a battleground with flames of hatred, the fate of the factions lies in your hands. Added a new city, Victoria. After the commencement of the third beta test, you will have the chance to enter the beautiful surface world city of Victoria. As the main faction city, it will be the main stronghold against the Underworld. Added a new NPC, City Mayor Lilo. Miss Lilo is a beautiful duchess and will become the ruler of Victoria City. Don't bother her with unimportant things as she will not interact with the gamers. As a reminder, Lilo is not a fallen angel. Lilo is not a fallen angel. Lilo is not a fallen angel. Added a new NPC. I will add once I think of it. Added a new race, Orc. The Eternal Kingdom faction will have orcs as a new race. This is a stronger race than the gnome. They are commonly found as strong warriors, and they form the main combat power of the dungeon. Added a new race, Human. Normal constitution with slightly better willpower. Average intelligence, morals, and mana affinity. It's an average race. Added a new race, Fairy. This is a long-eared race with a shorter body than an elf. They have a longer lifespan than humans and high mana affinity, but their constitution is very poor. Added a new race, Elf. This is a race that lives in the woods. They love tree houses and are protectors of the environment and animals. They are vegetarians. They have good agility, a long lifespan, and good mana affinity, but their strength is poor. Added a new faction change system. Every gamer can freely change their faction, but there is a 5,000 cap for each faction. A gamer cannot change their faction if the cap is reached. Gamers who are with Eternal Kingdom can pay a fixed amount of magic stones to change to the Victoria faction. After changing factions, Eternal Kingdom reputation points will be converted to Victoria reputation points. Weapon level will also be adjusted accordingly. Equipment, magic stones, private land, and furniture cannot be inherited. However, game coins can be retained. The price for changing factions is high. Please consider it carefully. Once there are new updates, I will inform you again. Everyone will get to experience the new content once the third beta testing commences. The third beta test will be officially launched 2 days later. Please kindly wait for the upgrade. Chapter 306. Constructing the Surface City. After Sherlock's version 0.3 update was published, it received enthusiastic replies. Dreaming War Emperor. I am creating an elf with a goblin's face WW. Jam Badil. I'm choosing a human. On this average day, I am wearing common shoes and walking on the common street. Midnight Sprouts. Are you blind? I like the fallen angel. I am begging for the third beta test qualification. I will hack Shirley on the surface world. K_0601. New added investigation mission. Victoria's Secret. Meeting you at the deep end of my life. Eternal Dog, Tribal Pigs, Manual Comedy. Lord Sherlock. I understand your ambition of gaining the surface world's wealth, but aren't you too impulsive in creating a surface world base? The surface world has many different countries and is in perpetual chaos, but history has shown that once underworld races appear, they will unite and attack them. Though you have the doppelganger Precious Pearl, if the plan fails, they will attack the underworld and destroy the dungeon core. The losses will be huge. Brew suggested solemnly, I suggest we accumulate our power and attack the surface world. Michelangelo's previous conquest was a good plan. Conquering the underworld is the way. Why don't we start with Winterfell? Brew suggested conquering the underworld while Sherlock was browsing the replies of the gamers on the forum. Sherlock didn't respond to Brew. After reading the gamers' replies, he patted Eggface's head. Eggface was behind Sherlock playing computer games with intense focus, and he replied, "Stop disturbing me." In the next moment, Sherlock grabbed the wings of Eggface, whose claws were grasping his mouse. The computer screen showed a dinosaur, a Utahraptor, which was facing a small Tyrannosaurus, hidden in the grass. The game was called The Isle, and it was an online game with dinosaurs as game characters. Sherlock wasn't interested in such a game. "Do you want to go to the surface world?" Sherlock asked as he grabbed Eggface and walked outside. "Can you wait until I eat that small Tyrannosaurus? It has been calling since I started playing." Eggface was pleading earnestly while clinging to his mouse. "No." Lord Sherlock was emotionless. "Get onto the Beetleman." Outside the Winterfell garrison guard station, a few armed orcs were about to escort the dispirited Andrew up a Beetleman that was parked outside. Andrew's hands were handcuffed with 3 layers of rune mana. His eyes were red and filled with irritation, but the handcuffs disabled his power. Even if he was a superior devil, he was unable to resist. The orcs pushed Andrew forward, while Baron Nicholas was standing by the Beetleman. He was waiting for Andrew. "Hee, Nicholas, are you here to taunt me? Don't be smug. Eternal fire won't forsake me. All your accusations are slander. You will pay the price. The Merchant Alliance, Sherlock, and you will pay the price." Andrew had a wretched face as he scolded viciously. "Really? I don't think so. You will spend the rest of your life in regret. Of that, I'm sure." Nicholas lifted up his head and said, "I'm now Winterfell's dungeon lord. The appointment documents will come very soon, so don't you worry about Winterfell. Take him away." The orcs pulled Andrew towards the Beetleman. "I'll return. Andrew, will definitely return." Andrew struggled in pain, but he was dragged away by the orcs. The metal door was shut tight. Andrew sat in the metal cage. His eyes, which were filled with hatred, gradually receded. In the dark sky, a crimson moon and a white moon occupied opposite corners. The night breeze caressed the tips of the trees and made whistling sounds. A human in a gray windbreaker was pulling a small black boy who was 1.5 meters tall. They were walking in the dark forest. That man was the humanoid Sherlock. His height and appearance were common to a human. The small kid who looked as though he was being pulled out from black paint was Eggface. "What are we doing here?" Eggface was befuddled. He didn't understand why Sherlock made him walk the long tunnels, go through the teleport portal, and come up to the dangerous surface world. Eggface was puzzled. If a superior devil and a black dragon appeared in the surface world, would it not attract a large group of grand priests? "Your job is to create a stable dungeon core," Sherlock said to Eggface as he placed a white pearl in the forest. Sherlock then created a large rune mana formation circle and said, "Do you see these rune formations? Transfer your mana over here. If you're tired, take a rest. Once all of the rune formations are activated, your mission is complete. If I'm not back by then, wait for me here. There are lots of worms in the forest. If you're hungry, catch some for yourself. There is a drain by the side. Quench your thirst over there." Sherlock gave Eggface a green net for capturing worms. Eggface looked at the green net in his hands and then at Sherlock. He gaped but didn't say a word. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The rough translation for his behavior was, "I am the king of darkness, the dragon of the devil flames. You have me in this dangerous place in the middle of the night just to have me do such a thing? And there are no food and drinks? If your performance is good, I'll increase your gaming time by an hour." "For a month," Sherlock said as he extended his finger. "Don't worry, Lord Sherlock, this is my job," Eggface said solemnly. Sherlock nodded and walked out of the forest. Eggface asked, "Lord Sherlock, where are you going?" "Recruitment," Sherlock said. Chapter 307. Excommunicated Rider. Outside a grand manor, a flag was flown, one that had the side of a lion that was brightly colored. This was the emblem of a noble. A few glass lamps illuminated the main door of the manor. An armored figure was thrown out the main door of the manor and subsequently collapsed to the ground. He used a single arm to support himself and climbed up with great effort. A few armored warriors who were grasping their sword hilts stood by the side. They were the ones who threw him out. A man in a black tuxedo walked to him and said, "I think you've heard the master. The excommunication notice from the church was served to my master. You are a pathetic non-believer who dared to deceive my master. Get lost immediately." The warriors returned back to the manor, and the main door was shut. It was quiet again, and flies danced around the incandescent lamps. The collapsed person climbed up and patted the soil and dust off himself, then began to limp towards the darkness. Before he could go far, he saw a man wearing a black windbreaker and a tall western hat standing before him. The man took off his hat as a show of respect. Then, he smiled and said, "It seems like you are down and out. Don't worry or be afraid. I heard that when God shuts the door on you, even the windows will be welded. But it's all right. There will always be mysterious and kind souls who will help you. My name is Sherlock, and this is my name card." Sherlock passed him a small name card. On the card were the words, "Service for custom-made life, Sherlock. Your life's best assistant." The card didn't have any contact details or the company's address. "How can you help me?" The man lifted his head. With the lamp's illumination, his face appeared thin and pallid. However, his eyes were filled with hope, as though he were a man who grabbed onto a bundle of straw when he fell into the water. "Your name is Lancelot. You had an affair with the Lord Overseer's wife. Hence your lands were confiscated, and you were exiled. Because of your sin, the church terminated your teaching post. Even your last hope, Baron Glamorgan, wasn't willing to keep you. He wasn't willing to keep you not because of your excommunication but because his Lord Overseer intends to confiscate his land and called for his arrest. Therefore, he had to send you away. In other words, he is true to you." Lancelot was taken aback. He ran back to the main door of the manor. Sherlock took out a crystal ball and showed him that a carriage was leaving the manor. "Don't waste your effort, the Baron and his family have fled. What do you want? Why did you investigate me?" Lancelot gazed at him with wide eyes. Sherlock took out some documents and said, "I only knew about it from the documents. As for Baron Glamorgan, everyone knows that the king wants to confiscate Baron Glamorgan's land. As for me, I'm going to give you a job." Sherlock took out a new document with the words, "Victoria Recruitment Letter of Intent. I'm managing a freedom city called Victoria. The location is on the land of the Duke of York, which isn't far from here. If you're willing to work for me, I provide protection and a job. The job is simple: teach the beginners combat techniques." Lancelot frowned and asked, "Why did you look for me?" "Because you're the best trainer for combat skills." Sherlock then added frankly, "and the cheapest." Lancelot finally accepted Sherlock's recruitment and signed his name on the letter of intent. Lancelot didn't have a choice as he needed the job and a place to stay. The Freedom City may not have been the best choice, but it was his only choice. After Lancelot signed the work contract that had mana binding, the mysterious man, Sherlock, left a detailed address and vanished. Lancelot found a place to rest for the night, then he set off for that address. He left the city, traveled through the valleys, walked on plains, climbed over hills, and helped a village fend off some bandits. He also evaded the capture of mercenary soldiers. Then, he arrived at that address. A forest on the Duke of York's land. Lancelot didn't see a freedom city. If there was one, it was most likely elven. Because, besides trees, there were only trees. Besides elves, who lived in treehouses, there were no races that lived in treehouses. Yes, there were the birdmen. Lancelot laughed at his own sense of humor. Then, he heard swishing sounds. Someone was in the forest. Lancelot was wary. He grasped the hilt of his sword and unsheathed it slowly, nervously looking in the direction of the sound. Then, he saw a small green kid coming out from the trees. The small kid held a net for catching worms. When the kid saw Lancelot, he was given a fright. It wasn't a human. Lancelot immediately recognized that it wasn't a human because humans didn't have green skin. The green melded perfectly with the surrounding trees, so it was a protective color. The small green kid stared at Lancelot for a few seconds. Then, he put the worm from the net into his mouth and asked, "Are you here to report for work?" Lancelot was dumbfounded, but he quickly replied, "No, Sherlock asked me to assume my post here. It's called Victoria. This is it. Follow me." Lancelot saw the green kid walk into the groves, and he followed. After walking for tens of minutes, Lancelot was stunned by the sight before him. In the woods was a piece of. It was a stomped-out empty space that was a few square meters in size. There were a few strange fellows sitting in the empty space. Chapter 308. Things to note about Victoria. Greetings, my name is Untouchable. I'm a vegetarian and a protector of the animals and the environment. I'm Victoria's new botanist trainer. A dark-skinned elf in underwear made of withered plants was half naked. The elf's skin was coated with oil and looked shiny. I'm called Hill, a steam-powered engineer. I'm in charge of Victoria's steam-powered machines. It was a dwarf with a long beard. He looked the most normal amongst the rest. I'm the king. Hill is my brother. I'm Victoria's blacksmith. Do you want to play a round of cards? It was another dwarf who looked like the dwarf called Hill. The last person was bald and sat cross-legged on the ground. He was dressed like a monk, and his beard was braided. He had the look of a grand priest. Would you like to listen to the gospel of the Lord? I have a question booklet. It will let you touch the heavens. Lancelot introduced himself to them and then found an empty spot and sat down. He asked about them. The four of them, an elf, two dwarves, and a strangely garbed human grand priest, were recruited by Sherlock. They had the same recruitment contract for a year, and the contracts all had a strong mana binding. As for the monthly salary, bro, don't you think you've asked too much? I came from afar to work here to enjoy the diversification of the city. I respect your strange tendencies. I hope your steel boots don't have leather. Why don't you respect my privacy? I don't think you take meat, do you? The vegetarian and protector of animals and the environment, the elf, spoke very bluntly. Salary? I'm an ambitious dwarf. Why do you mention such an uncouth matter? Before talking about salary, do you want to play a round of cards? You don't fancy doing the question booklet? Lancelot felt that their salaries weren't high because his salary was pitiful. Though he was regretful, the contract was sealed. Besides Victoria, he didn't know where he could go. Was this really a city? Seems like everyone is here. While Lancelot was full of questions, the mysterious Sherlock appeared before him. Welcome to Victoria. Though it's only a forest, it will soon become a great freedom city. Lancelot wanted to say something, but Sherlock extended a finger and interrupted him. Don't ask. If you ask, it means the construction workers are on their way. I won't explain the details to you. You only need to do your jobs well. Sherlock took off his hat as a gesture of goodwill and said, I may not be able to interact with you in the future. Duchess Victoria will be managing Victoria. I hope that you will work well with her. Sherlock hailed the green-skinned kid. Then he said to them, there will be a batch of residents coming tomorrow. Please work according to the contract requirement. Farewell. Wait, what contract requirement? Lancelot was taken aback. He took out his contract while the dwarf Hill asked, didn't you read the contract? Isn't it sufficient just to glance through it? Lancelot was panicking. He knew that the contract was binding, but on seeing the dense words, he didn't read them in detail. Lancelot flipped the contract to the relevant pages and started reading. 1. The Victorian residents can be blunt. If they provoke you, please do not be bothered as they will not change. 2. The Victorian residents will not harm you. Do not use your weapons against them as they are of no threat. 3. Compared to food, they may prefer clay. Do not be surprised, they came from a culture of eating clay. Gradually, they will eat normal food. More or less. 4. I have not recruited a suitable chef. Please provide your own meals. Do not worry about the Victorian residents, they will provide their own meals. 5. If a resident falls to the ground dead, it can be starvation, exhaustion, or blood loss. Please do not shift or bury their corpse. 6. Try not to interact with them. You will not understand what they are saying. 7. Billy is in charge of healing. Do not doubt him. He is the best healing grand priest. If you are injured, do not approach the Victorian residents for help as they may worsen your condition. Look for Billy directly. The bald grand priest is Billy. Lancelot lifted his head to glance at the bald grand priest. He was holding an exercise book and smiling cordially at Lancelot. There was a lot more that was related to his work and the things to take note of. Lancelot was curious about the coming residents. What were these fellows up to? In Eternal Kingdom Dungeon, there are 10 minutes before the game shuts down for the third beta test upgrade. Put your things down and go offline. A kind-hearted gamer stood outside the Dungeon Lord main hall and shouted loudly. The gamers had prior bad experiences. This time, they wouldn't run around when the game was shutting down. They returned to put down their things before going offline. If they lost their equipment, it wouldn't be worth it. Arthur followed his companions to the Pioneer Alliance main hall. Though the faction of Victoria was newly opened, after serious consideration, they decided not to change factions. The Underworld was interesting, and they could experience the Surface World faction in the future. According to what they knew about the game, the most important thing was that the city in the surface world had just started, so the Victorian gamers would have to slog for their lives. Chapter 309. Commencement of Third Beta Testing. The servers will be shutting down in 30 seconds. To prevent loss of items, all online gamers are to get offline immediately. When the last full service announcement was made, all gamers had gone offline. Brainiac looked at the quiet eternal kingdom and wrote in his journal. Simba, Mufasa, and Moros stopped work. They were in Simba's house, chatting, drinking tea, and smoking metal sticks. Beast and Yoda were closer to each other as they were once part of the Merchant Alliance. After the Winterfell incidents and with the help and assistance of Sherlock, Winterfell dismissed Evelyn's arrest warrant. Sherlock encouraged her to find a new job and start fresh, but there was no progress. Evelyn would say, "It's not easy to find a job. Though I'm embarrassed, I hope to impose on you for a few days. I'll work hard for Lord Sherlock." Sherlock wouldn't decline her request. The real situation was that, due to some reasons, Evelyn didn't apply for jobs seriously. Even if she sent out her resumes and was successful, she would give all sorts of reasons to decline. Sherlock could only encourage her. What else could he say? It was best to just smile. The gamers were all offline. Evelyn, who had been busy working, was able to take a rest. She was shopping and touring in Winterfell. The news of the large recruitment of servants was released to them, so everyone was enjoying their leisure time. They were going to face 5 times the number of gamers very soon. Lord Sherlock, all preparations are completed. The servers are disconnected from the internet. All gamers have returned to the dungeon. Nobody requested for a change of faction. This proves that your dungeon management is successful. They welcome your style of management. Brew was fawning over Sherlock, inflating his ego. The servers will restart in 1 hour as according to plan. Allocate the gamers to their factions. Brew said immediately, "Don't worry, Lord Sherlock, I made all of the arrangements. Miss Lilo has completed her preparations, and we are connected via mana. I will be using Miss Lilo's mana for all mana usage on the surface world." Sherlock nodded and browsed through the queries of the gamers. In a bright and spacious room, the furnishings were luxurious, like a palace. 4 round pillars that were 7 to 8 meters high were the support pillars of the room. A gaming capsule was placed in the middle of the room, and 2 rows of servants stood by the side. The gaming capsule flashed with green light before the door opened gradually. A bit of mysterious fluid seeped out of the capsule, but most of it flowed back into the device. A 1.8 meter tall young and handsome lad walked out. He had defined muscles and wore a tight-fitting t-shirt and shorts. The female servants behind him watched with glittering eyes. 2 servants walked forward to help him remove his shirt and pants. Then, a servant took a towel and wiped him clean before helping him change into a new set of clothing. The young lad walked out of the huge room, where a bald butler was already waiting for him. When he saw him, he walked towards the young lad and said, "Young Master Ma, this is your match for your blind date. The time is 6 p.m. I'm not going. Alert me in 40 minutes. The game is undergoing maintenance for an hour. I don't want to be denied access because the server is full," the young lad said without hesitation. "But young master, this match is the nephew of your dad's business partner. If you decline," the young lad thought for a while and said, "then arrange a match that has a similar build to mine and who looks like me. The previous one is pretty good. Arrange for a location later in the night. The rest is up to you." "I understand, young master." The butler saw the determined attitude of his young master and kept quiet. He bowed and walked to the side. Another middle-aged man walked up and whispered in the lad's ear. The young lad nodded and boarded the indoor car with the man. They left in the car. The female servants and the bald butler bowed until the young master disappeared from view. The young lad and the middle-aged man drove the indoor car for a few minutes before they arrived at an alfresco glass room. There were 2 strong white men who were dressed like special agents and equipped with ear mics standing outside. They bowed at the young lad, and one of the white men positioned his eyeball for a retina scan device placed by the door. After confirming his identity, the door of the huge room opened. The young lad followed the middle-aged man into the glass room. Outside the glass window was a scenic view of the azure ocean. There were seagulls and a lighthouse at the end. The sea and the sky melded together and created a beautiful picture. The young lad didn't even take a look. He found a place to sit down and received a document docket from the middle-aged man. He opened the docket and examined the contents. We investigated for some time. This dungeon game doesn't have any employees. Even the factory for producing the gaming capsules can't be found. We have investigated all possible high-tech companies, but it's as though the game company just appeared out of thin air. There's no information at all. I understand. What about that matter? The young lad returned the docket to the middle-aged man, who nodded. He passed a new document docket to the young lad and said, "The information on the person that you wanted to investigate is inside the docket." The young man opened up the docket and took out the first sheet of paper. On it was the picture of an average-looking young girl, who was smiling shyly. "We found her online information according to your instructions. We didn't contact her in person." The young lad nodded and looked at the time before standing up. "I'm going now. I'm going back to the gaming capsule to browse the discussion forum." Chapter 310. Recruitment of Guild Members, Part 1. Dragonborn sat up from the ground. Beside him, many other gamers sat up. They had superior equipment, their bald heads were shiny, and their eyes were filled with vigor. This was the guild location for Springfield Flower Kindergarten. All of the guild members stayed here. For the upgrade of the third beta testing, all guild members went offline from here. The 1-hour maintenance had elapsed, and the game had restarted, so Dragonborn and his members reconnected to the game. There was no new CG animation, and there was no new amendment to the login interface. If the game official hadn't announced the third beta testing, Dragonborn would have thought it was just offline maintenance. "Let's pull out our banner. Dragonborn, let's go." Dragonborn was feeling groggy. Beside him was a houndhead man, Sealhead Ling Chong, who was also the deputy chairman of Springfield Flower Kindergarten. He was carrying a flag with the words, "Springfield Flower Kindergarten," on it. From the looks of the words, it appeared the gamers wrote them. The other members were also carrying flags or horizontal banners. They were publicity materials for recruiting new members. Coming, they're coming. Dragonborn was wearing full body armor. When he got up, the armor made clanking noises. He went to a corner to wash his face in a water jar. Then, he followed everyone out of the house. "Dragonborn, walk forward. I'll help you polish your armor." Take a spear hit took a dirty rag and polished the stained armor. Before going offline, they were maintaining their equipment. Let the flag bearer walk in front. It's normal practice in sports competitions. Dragonborn pointed at Sealhead Ling Chong. Then, other gamers spoke up. "It's different. You are the mascot of our guild. Yes, you are the runner-up of the Dark Rider tournament. You have to walk in front. In Mafia movies, the boss is always at the front." Dragonborn didn't decline the suggestion. They quickly obtained a good location. Soon, the new gamers would be coming in. They wanted to recruit new blood. The horizontal banners and flags were for recruiting new members. When Dragonborn arrived at the Dungeon Lord main hall, a few guilds had already occupied good locations. They even constructed recruitment booths. The guilds were Dragon Raja, the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance, the Pioneer Alliance, and other large guilds. The feeling was like a recruitment exercise for first-year university students. Moros was with Simba and Mufasa, sitting in Mufasa's carpenter workshop. From this vantage point, they could observe the movement of the green-skinned creatures. Today was the day for the new members to arrive in the dungeon. The green-skinned creatures looked very excited. Simba smoked his red-hot metal stick. As he sipped the bloody chrysanthemum tea, Moros suddenly shouted, "Coming!" They're coming. In front of them, numerous teleport portals abruptly appeared. New goblins who either looked excited or dazed walked out of the portals. They had green symbols above their heads. The prepared veteran gamers shouted, "Recruiting new members! Recruiting new members! The largest online guild in China, Dragon Raja, welcomes you to join in." A few gnomes with gorgeous armor, as well as houndhead men who were wearing non-magical robes and high hats, stood in front of a recruitment booth. The recruitment booth was small compared to the size of the armored gamers. They had no choice as Sherlock only leased out a small space for them. When he discovered that the guilds planned to construct booths to recruit new blood, Sherlock created a detailed leasing plan. The recruitment locations at the Dungeon Lord main hall entrance were categorized according to the sizes of 2, 4, and 10 square meters. The rental costs were 5, 10, and 20 magic stones respectively. Most of the guilds selected the 10 square meter locations for their recruitment drives. What, 2 guild applications to increase the size to 20 square meters? Would Sherlock allow the gamers to exploit this loophole? Of course not. Each guild was only allowed to have a single application. Members of the large guilds had to rack their brains to create their booths in the small areas of 10 square meters to attract new blood. The simplest and most perfunctory method was what Springfield Flower Kindergarten had done. They used a mascot, flags, and horizontal banners for publicity. The richer guilds like Dragon Raja and the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance had gamers who wore superior equipment stand outside. Most importantly, they used rich benefits to attract new blood. For example, Dragon Raja's benefits were: after joining the guild, gamers would receive a full set of green armor and a Winterfell standard short sword. The weekly payout was 200 renminbi. The guild would conduct equipment maintenance, and the costs would be shouldered by the guild. Also, each enemy guild member killed in a guild war would earn 100 bronze coins as a reward. When Dragon Raja publicized its benefits, the adjacent Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance was unhappy. The chairman immediately changed his publicity slogan. After joining the guild, gamers would receive 2 full sets of armor and a Winterfell standard short sword or a standard pike. The weekly payout was 220 renminbi. The guild would conduct equipment maintenance, and the costs would be shouldered by the guild. Each enemy guild member killed in a guild war would earn 150 bronze coins as a reward. The benefits of joining the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance had to be higher than Dragon Raja. In response, Dragon Raja taunted, "Do you have money? Don't close your eyes and offer the sky. Make sure you can pay. If you owe your members' salary, you will become a laughing stock." The Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance refused to take the insult and started bickering with Dragon Raja. It looked like they had to settle their grievances in the arena again. Besides these 2 violent guilds, most of the guilds were friendly. The most popular guild was the First Beta Gamers Pioneer Alliance. They had the 100 most powerful gamers in the game. Almost everybody had heard of their names. The gameplay and strategy guides were mostly provided by the First Beta Gamers as well. The Pioneer Alliance also made the best progress in the 15-member instance dungeon of Spectre College. Chapter 311. Recruitment of Guild Members, Part 2. At the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall in Eternal Kingdom, a group of third beta gamers whose characters were green-skinned goblins were queuing up in front of a booth. The third beta gamers had received their daily, weekly, and monthly missions, which consisted mainly of mining ore, the expansion of Eternal Kingdom's boundary, and construction of new buildings. Most of the third beta gamers had spent the majority of their time browsing the discussion forum. Though they didn't have the chance to play the game, they had already played the game mentally after reading the comprehensive strategy guides. Most of them could memorize Eternal Kingdom's map. To experience the legendary Sacred Night, they attended tuition classes daily and studied their abandoned textbooks. Besides browsing the forum and working, they used their remaining time to study. Learning was the way to ace the game. Once the third beta gamers entered the game, they didn't wander around like headless flies. They were very clear about what they wanted. Those unaffiliated gamers chose to join existing guilds that they thought were suitable for them. Some individualistic gamers preferred to be lone rangers and didn't join any guilds. Then there were those gamers who were ambitious. They wanted to be famous and be a guild chairman. The gamers who gathered at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall and were looking at the guild booths had the intention of joining a guild. After a few months of testing, the first beta gamers proved that Dungeon was a group game. Whether it was to challenge an instance dungeon, fight in a battle campaign scenario, exploration, construction of houses, trading, or the completion of daily and weekly missions, the gamers required friends to help each other. Social interaction was extremely important in this game. It was like the real world. The graphic quality, the texture and feel of materials, and the behavior of NPCs were almost like reality, with the exception of the pain threshold adjustment. The longest queue was at the Pioneer Alliance's booth. This guild was set up in the second beta testing. Now, the guild had decided to recruit an ambitious 500 members in the third beta test. Currently, the largest guild only had 500 members. After recruiting 500 members, the guild land had to be expanded, which required magic stones and game coins. In addition, There was a monthly management and rental fee. That was another considerable sum of magic stones and game coins. Even Dragon Raja and the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance didn't have such ambitious plans. They only planned to recruit 300 to 400 members. An additional recruitment of 500 members would cause a huge increase in rental fees. To the Pioneer Alliance, it wasn't a big problem. All of the rich gamers were in this guild. Veteran, are there any benefits in joining the guild? Veteran, I want to join the guild. Veteran, please invite me, I'm sincere. I'm different from those cheapskates who just ask casually. The new gamers had formed a long queue in front of Peasant. To join the guild, the gamers tried to persuade the veterans who were checking their qualifications vigorously. At an adjacent booth next to the Pioneer Alliance, a few gnomes who were wearing maid costumes and tuxedos held hands as they danced. Their names had the guild title, Friendly Lilo Alliance. Perhaps due to the guild name and their equipment, which looked inferior, the number of new gamers making inquiries at the booth was negligible. That didn't stop their passionate and diligent dancing. It looked like dancing. Peasant recovered his attention and continued nervously with his recruitment of new blood. Besides the recruitment of new blood, many gamers were doing business. As the commercial area was well developed, all of the trading stalls were concentrated in the commercial area. But now, there were a lot more gamers gathered at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall. A few small guilds couldn't afford the large rental like the large guilds. It was difficult for the small guilds to spend 10 to 20 magic stones, as working in Winterfell for a month would only earn 10 magic stones. Therefore, those who could do business wanted to use the chance to sell goods. For example, Springfield Flower Kindergarten was a classic guild that required money. Even though Dragonborn was the runner-up of the Dark Rider tournament and was second only to Arthur, Dragonborn wasn't rich. From his current investment in the game, he wasn't rich. Dragonborn only spent a few hundred renminbi buying bronze coins and magic stones. To depend on working to earn magic stones and bronze coins was too slow. This amount was considered paltry in the eyes of the guild members. The other guild members were also not rich. After accumulating 20 magic stones, they rented a 10 square meter booth. They wanted to earn back their costs, so they also sold some goods at the recruitment booth. Selling dagger. The best dagger in Winterfell. Take a spear hit carried a large advertisement and shouted loudly, but his specially prepared sales dialogue didn't garner good comments. Those new gamers weren't interested in his goods. Why are they not interested in my daggers? Take a spear hit, who felt discouraged, turned his head and asked Sealhead Ling Chong. Because they feel you're crude. What? Selling silver coins? Yes, I'm selling silver coins. 1 silver coin for 500 renminbi. This is the cheapest in the entire dungeon. Sealhead Ling Chong sold 2 silver coins to a naked third beta goblin. Why did he look for Sealhead Ling Chong to buy silver coins? Nobody knew. Chapter 312. Lancelot was befuddled. Some gamers were focused on game exploration. As a game with a high degree of freedom and realistic settings, exploration was an important aspect of the game. There was no lack of adventurers amongst the gamers. Marco Polo was a brave and knowledgeable adventurer. With the game in the third beta testing, besides new races, Marco Polo was very interested in the new faction in the surface world, Victoria. The name exuded a contemporary romantic feel. Compared to the frivolous-sounding Eternal Kingdom, Marco Polo preferred Victoria. On the official website, Victoria's races were all positive and cute. At least, they looked better than the Underworld goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. The strength of a race was dependent on the game version, while looks stayed with the character for a lifetime. Some gamers had differing opinions from Marco Polo. They thought great-looking races may not be cool. In fact, strange-looking creatures might look cooler. With regards to aesthetics, there wouldn't be any conclusion even after discussing it for a long time. It wasn't possible for Marco Polo to switch factions based on looks. Even if he wanted to, he was unable to do so as the faction limit was reached within 10 minutes of the third beta testing. For Marco Polo, as long as he could explore freely, it was the same in the surface world or in the underworld. He was currently in the Marsh Inkspewer town to prepare for exploration. He bought the required food and checked his equipment, supplies, and the latest map. Marsh Inkspewer town wasn't far from gate number 2 of Winterfell. It was quickly developed beside the Marsh Inkspewer village. The gamers supported the Marsh Inspewers against the large lizards because the large lizards didn't speak, had no intelligence, and bit the gamers. The Marsh Inkspewers, on the other hand, were polite and invited the gamers as guests to their houses. Though they were ugly, the large lizards were repulsive as well. The gamers killed many large lizards, to the point that the dead lizards could circle Eternal Kingdom tens of rounds. Thus the Marsh Inkspewer held the gamers in reverence. The Marsh Inkspewer town had become an important aspect of the game's daily missions and adventures. The Marsh Inkspewers helped by providing rides, medicine, maps, and even Marsh Inkspewer warriors. However, the warriors would shout, "Wah!" and flee when there was fighting. The Marsh Inkspewer town wasn't actually the town of the Marsh Inkspewers. To be precise, it was a town built by the gamers next to the Marsh Inkspewer village. It was a small town surrounded by a wall made of rocks. Initially, the gamers created the buildings in the Marsh Inkspewer town so that they could live there. With the relocation of the residents of the old district, they had moved to Winterfell. The gamers who created the buildings received some remuneration. The Marsh Inkspewer town was previously used as a starting point for the adventurer gamers to explore the surroundings. Now, it was home for the residents who migrated from the Winterfell Old District. Chants of reading were heard. The kids from the Old District were now able to study 8 classes every day without any fear. They revised their homework at night and finished tens of sheets of examination paper daily. They also took examinations periodically. There were no holidays for them. The Underworld kids were now able to study properly. They were moved to tears of joy and bliss. Marco Polo was their teacher once and taught several classes. He created tons of homework and experienced the joy of torturing the students. He admitted that it was a comfortable feeling. Though the NPCs from Winterfell occupied the houses built by the gamers, they brought with them many missions. For example, helping to do housework for a month, helping to take care of kids, helping families to clear their clogged water pipes, helping them build a tunnel from Eternal Kingdom to their town. Though there weren't many magic stones to be earned, they provided necessities, food, and valuable information as rewards. The gamers were happy to complete the missions because there could be hidden strange encounter missions along the way. Marco Polo completed a lot of these missions, so he was very close to the residents. He was embarking on an expedition because he heard the news about the surface world. Victoria Freedom Town? I'm not sure about that. We've only heard about the surface world in legends. The surface world is full of evil. Eternal Kingdom is very close to the surface world. I think you can reach the surface world after a day and a night of traveling. Yes, that's the path to the surface world. However, I'm not very sure. Perhaps you can check with Lord Sherlock? Marco Polo went to look for Lord Sherlock. Lord Sherlock isn't receiving any guests. If you have questions, keep them to yourself. Eggface was the one who received Marco Polo. After that, Eggface returned back to the Dungeon Lord main hall as if he had urgent work. Marco Polo didn't intend to wait. He wanted to be the first gamer to find the surface world. This would be a great adventure, an encounter of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria. Marco Polo set off with his backpack and his great ambitions. In the Freedom Town Victoria, Lancelot was befuddled. Chapter 313. Human, Fairy, and Elf. Lancelot waited in the forest for half a day, but there were no workers who were constructing the city. When he was about to lose his patience and thought that Sherlock was fooling him, he saw a strange-looking pumpkin carriage without a driver coming out from the grove. A small girl, who was wearing a tutu skirt and had pure white skin, dismounted. Behind her were 3 fat hamsters. They looked too large and scary. There were lots of druids in this world who could train certain animals to be their assistants. Everyone gathered forward. The small girl didn't say a word as she dismounted from the carriage. Lancelot looked on in disbelief. The empty space bulged up while soil and rocks assembled on their own. The surrounding leaves accumulated with strong swirling winds and stuck to the bulging soil. Before long, a grand castle that was made of soil and rock appeared. Please work hard. I'm Duchess Lilo, I'll be your Lord Overseer. After speaking, Lilo brought her 3 hamsters into the newly constructed castle. She paused before turning her head to speak to Lancelot and the rest. Oh, yes, try to solve your own problems. If you can't, find them. They are Big Boss, Second Boss, and Fat Otaku. The three hamsters raised their hands. Then, the middle hamster walked out and dry coughed twice before saying, "I'm Big Boss, Miss Lilo's first assistant. Our workers are coming soon. Do you have any questions?" At the recruitment location outside the Dungeon Lord main hall. "I wonder what the situation is like in the surface world. If only we could create another account," Not Wearing Pants said thoughtfully as he sat in a chair with his shiny armor. "I just went to the discussion forum to take a look. There are only trees. The only building is a soil castle. I told you before that Victoria's starting from scratch. I wonder when they will be able to start challenging the instance dungeon," Burning Chesthair said as he gloated. "Okay, I'll arrange for someone to find the way to Victoria. Then we'll raid the city. Arthur, you'll be in charge. I'll make Arthur the god of our faction," Sylvanas said as she slammed on the table. "But the city lord is Lilo. She's the one who killed Samael directly," Peasant said worriedly. "Do you think we can defeat her?" "Seems quite difficult," Not Wearing Pants said. What shall we do? Why don't we organize a group to raid the wilderness outside Victoria?" Sylvanas was itching for a fight. "It's better that we don't. We don't know where Victoria is or how the two factions will get along." Burning Chesthair gave his opinion. The other gamers nodded in agreement. Only Arthur looked distracted. While they were chatting, the other gamers were actively recruiting guild members. Not Wearing Pants and his companions appeared as mascots, then they decided to challenge the 15-member instance dungeon. Arthur didn't object and followed Not Wearing Pants and the rest. Before leaving, he turned to look at the flower bed. The little fairy was living up in a tree. Nobody knew when the luscious tree was grown, but it looked 4 or 5 years old, even though it was only a short time. The little fairy used the leaves and branches to make a little house. Many gamers were at the seedbed cultivating various plants. Since the soil quality was good, with the assistance of mana, the plants only required 10 minutes to mature. Most of them were alchemy materials and condiments for cooking. Though they weren't valuable, they were basic plants, and the gamers had to start from the basics to gain experience. Plant cultivators were very rare in this game. Arthur wasn't concerned about the value of the cultivated plants. Only a few new goblins were standing at the seedbed, and Arthur heard someone ask, "Where is veteran Raintia?" "Yeah, it's the first day of the 3rd beta test, and Raintia isn't online." "I was thinking of meeting such a legendary, revered character." "That's a joke. Is that how you show your reverence?" Arthur turned his head back and left with his companions. Lilo sat in the small castle that was created using her mana skills. She frowned as she felt her mana draining. In front of her was a huge crystal ball, which was an enlarged doppelganger precious pearl. To be precise, it was a fusion of a portion of brew and the doppelganger precious pearl. At this time, the crystal ball was showing the face of Sherlock. "How is it, Lilo?" Sherlock asked casually as he appeared within the crystal ball. Behind him was Eggface, who was sitting behind a computer and typing furiously on the keyboard. Sherlock was in the Dungeon Lord main hall, conversing with Lilo. "Mana is draining too fast. There is a problem with the dungeon core that you have provided." Lilo frowned and looked outside the window. Teleport portals appeared incessantly, and humans, fairies, and elves walked out of the portals. There were proportionately more humans. They were wearing shorts. For females, they had simple shirts. Some of them looked beautiful and handsome, while others looked ugly. Some humans squatted on the ground and moved in strange manners. No matter how Lilo looked, these humans, fairies, and elves didn't look like construction workers. Lilo asked Sherlock, "Did you use my mana to create these races?" Chapter 314. Lancelot's Misgivings. "Ah, you've discovered it so fast?" Sherlock didn't panic when Lilo discovered her loss of mana. He said calmly, "Lilo, this is the crux of the conquest of the Heavenly Kingdom. You thought I cheated you of your investment, fled, and set up a dungeon?" "Yes." Lilo nodded. "No, of course not," Sherlock said firmly. "When have I deceived you?" "The previous time, when you secretly coveted Satan's treasure," Lilo said without thinking. "That was an accident. I feel that I explained it to you in detail," Sherlock said. "Let's not talk about the past. But Lilo, this time, we have a powerful army that can help us defeat the army of the Heavenly Kingdom. This army requires your unbridled supply of mana. Don't feel that I'm treating you like a mana storage device. You're a leader like the title that I have given you, the Great Duchess Lilo." You'll be their leader and create a strong foundation on the surface world. Victoria will be our stepping board, a powerful stronghold for us to launch our attacks at the Heavenly Kingdom. Of course, before we accumulate enough power, we have to disguise ourselves. Before the time comes, you have to perform your role as a duchess and learn about the knowledge and etiquette of the nobles, if you have the time. I recruited 4 talents to help you manage the city. A spirited rider and a wanted criminal. He is also an excommunicated non-believer who is extremely decadent. I feel that he is extremely suitable for the job. The elf is a vegetarian and protector of the environment and animals. He is exiled and hard to get along with. But believe me, he's suitable for us. The 2 dwarven brothers are middle-aged creatures who, in addition to repaying their housing loan, have to support their grandparents and children. If they lose their jobs, they will pretend to go to work. These honest dwarves are easy to manage, though I feel that you won't be asking them to do things for you. As for the Grand Priest, don't worry, he's a fanatic believer and the easiest to control. Lilo paused for a while and asked, "Are there any other things for me to take note of?" "Just perform your role well, and don't reveal your identity. That's all. Leave the rest to me." Sherlock looked at the time and said, "I have many newcomers, and I'm giving them a speech. The newcomers have to swear their allegiance to the Dungeon Lord. Contact me via the crystal ball if there are any issues. I'll be using this mana channel." The images in the crystal ball vanished. Lilo looked at the noisy humans, fairies, and elves and pondered. Then she muttered to herself, "Swear allegiance." Hoodlum was a young lad with a bright future. In the game, he had violet hair and average-looking features. And unruly behavior. His spine was distorted. Even when he was standing, he was hunchbacked. His thigh was level with his head. When he ran, it was very awkward for him. With such distortion, he was unable to run fast. He could only waddle like a duck. Why did Hoodlum create such a character? Hoodlum was a professional at creating characters. Gosh, are you a fan of the Ugly Club? You created a Hoodlum. That's hilarious. What about Great Centenarian? Jasmine Girl? Logan? The shops in Victoria are doomed. That's cracking me up. What was the situation? Lancelot had never encountered such strange humans, fairies, and elves. The creatures were either super beautiful with excellent figures or as ugly as the legendary ancient gods. Otherwise, they had severely distorted figures. Were they construction workers? What about their tools? Safety helmets? Supervisor? They didn't have construction materials or machines. There was a lot of wood around, but there were no rocks. And there were no rock mines nearby. Did they intend to build a freedom city based on wood? The strangest thing was that they chatted enthusiastically after coming out of the teleport portals. They didn't mind the thin clothing that they had. Did they not feel cold in this weather? Why were the 3 races of human, fairy, and elf so familiar with each other? And they could chat so happily? Lancelot was unable to get along well with the nagging Grand Priest, let alone fairies and dwarves. What were the green words above their heads? Lancelot was full of doubts. According to his contract with Sherlock, he couldn't grab them and ask. Moreover, it was impolite. Though he was excommunicated and exiled, he was inherently a knight. While Lancelot's mind was filled with questions, the number of humans, fairies, and elves had breached 1,000. Without a leader, once the numbers breached the limit, then it could cause chaos. In fact, chaos was starting to rear its ugly head. Lancelot noticed a few of the creatures arguing, and such conflicts were increasing. When someone came forward to lead, it could lead to a bloodbath. Lancelot was getting worried. It was then that a door opened on the second-level balcony of the castle. Duchess Lilo and the 3 hamsters walked down. The crowd started shouting, "Oh my gosh, that's my wife, the great angel Lilo. Is that the greedy fat otaku? The 3 of them look alike? Shush, stop talking. The plot animation is beginning. Wait, how did they know them?" Chapter 315. Residents of Victoria. Lancelot was trying to figure out the identity of Duchess Lilo when he discovered he was surrounded and being stared at by the half-naked gamers. The gamers noticed that Lancelot was an NPC. Lancelot was wearing armor, didn't have green words above his head, and had average looks. It was obvious that Lancelot was an NPC. Why is the NPC dazed? Because it's his first time here? That's the setting of NPCs. Anyways, that's the plot. We'll just watch. Some gamers tried to get close to Lancelot, but they stood in front of the castle. When they approached, at a certain distance, something stopped them from advancing. The obstacle was actually the plot animation mode. As the game's mana came from Lilo, once Lilo appeared and exerted her dominance, the gamers had to quiet down. Cough, cough. A fat hamster walked out with a script in his hand. He cleared his throat and said loudly, "Citizens of Victoria, this is the great Duchess Lilo. No matter what identity you have, from today onwards, you'll be the subject of Duchess Lilo. To build a better Victoria, devote your entire life to the city." Though the fat hamster was passionate, his helium voice made the gamers want to laugh. As they were being restrained, they were forced to hold back the laughter. "Yes, that's the way. Start working." Another fat hamster came forward and shouted, "Can we find something to eat?" Another fat hamster looked as if he was pleading the gamers. Lancelot was full of doubts, but since he was a Forsaken Knight, he didn't have many requests. He could only go along with these weird fellows from the teleport portals and build a new home. At least Duchess Lilo looked like she was powerful. To create wealth, cut the trees first. Lancelot felt for the sword at this waist. This was a precious sword that symbolized the honorable knight. Today, he might have to use it to cut trees. Would it break? As Lancelot was feeling melancholic, he saw two petite fairies, and one of them walked to a tree. It's too realistic. Though I have seen the screenshots, it looked flat like in the photograph. It's really realistic now that I'm playing the game. Why do we look different from the little fairy? The little fairy in Eternal Kingdom has wings, so why don't we have wings? We are larger in size too. Nonsense, we are fairies, she's a little fairy. Are you being silly? What the heck? They chatted as they walked to a small tree, picked up a rock on the ground, and smashed it against the tree. Wait, was that a rock? On the tree trunk? Were both of them intending to cut the trees using rocks? Were they mad? Then he saw a half-naked man whose spine was severely distorted. He crawled on the ground, waddling his thighs as he walked. He clenched his fists and smashed the tree trunk. Nutcases. Were all of them mad? Fortunately, they were the minority. Most of them were still chatting enthusiastically or complaining. How do we complete the mission? We're supposed to cut trees, but we aren't given the tools? There are tools. Didn't you see the mission tips? Go to the castle for the tools. Silly gamers. Can you open your eyes before complaining? Are you expecting the axe to be placed in your backpack? This game is very realistic. We have to get our own tools. Haven't you played games or browsed the discussion forum before? While you were arguing, I obtained the tools. I'm informing you that there are no more tools. Let's go. Let's carry rocks and food. Those with similar missions, follow me. Let's carry something. A group of them made a ruckus before leaving. Lancelot was surprised. They didn't have a discussion or receive any orders from the leader, but they knew what they were supposed to do. Some of them would stand there looking dazed before shouting. Anyone with a mission to explore the map? Let's do it together. My mission is cutting trees. Let me team up with someone with a carrying mission. The efficiency is higher. Where did they receive their missions? Lancelot went into deep thought. The Grand Priest, who was holding his exercise book, walked to Lancelot and gave him a fright. You must have doubts. Why are these people so strange? The Grand Priest was full of passion and joy. He said, previously, a god envoy said that these people received God's blessing. Most of them possess beautiful figures and appearances. That is the best evidence. Wait a moment, a god envoy? Though he had many doubts, Lancelot was most interested in the god envoy. I'm speaking of Lord Sherlock. He showed us God's miracle. He was the envoy appointed by God to guide us. It's time for us to guide these lost sheep. The Grand Priest looked at the crowd with green words and smiled like a compassionate father. Lancelot pondered carefully. He felt that Sherlock was very mysterious, but he didn't recall anything he did that was miraculous. Perhaps his disappearance was counted as a miracle? The Grand Priest walked to the gamers. He took out his exercise book and said to them, "Do you wish to go to heaven? I'll show you the way." The gamers who were thinking of how to cut the trees looked at the bald Grand Priest. They were taken aback for a while before they started shouting excitedly. Gosh, is that the Sacred Knight mission? Why am I so lucky? Gamers gathered around him and shouted, I want, me as well, me too, wah. Chapter 316. Natural Fighter Hoodlum's Post. In front of a puddle filled with mud, A bald grand priest held an exercise book with one hand and clasped his chest with the other while he prayed silently. In front of the grand priest was a nervous elf who was writing mathematical formulas on the ground. Lancelot knew that a lot of people were addicted to learning and that they believed in the sacred light. However, he hadn't seen any elves that believed in the sacred light. Did the elves not have many gods? The elf muttered to himself before standing up, seeming determined. The bald grand priest gave his blessings to the puddle, which shimmered with light. He said, "May the Lord bless you." He grasped the elf's head and pushed it into the puddle. After 3 minutes, the elf collapsed to the ground, no longer breathing. It's a pity he didn't pass the Lord's examination. His belief wasn't firm enough. The bald grand priest shook his head and spoke with sympathy. The people behind started scolding. "Wah, I said his revision wasn't sufficient. Revise properly before coming. You're wasting my time. I'm forgetting the formulas that I memorized. Why didn't you carry bricks honestly? Didn't you know that you aren't suited for studying? Give way. Don't hinder me from becoming a sacred knight. I have studied for a month. You're cool, veteran. You're very hard-working." When the bald grand priest saw that everyone was diligently learning, he was so touched that his hand trembled. He drowned another person who wasn't a devout believer and threw the body to one side. The grand priest was filled with purity and sacredness. The Lord, he was enlightened by the Lord's compassion and calling to guide the lost sheep. "Don't worry, I will lead them to the correct path." Updates. At Springfield Flower Kindergarten's recruitment booth, "Take a Spear" Hit shouted as he sat on the ground. "What's up with the updates?" Seal Head Ling Chong came over, looking puzzled. A post on Victoria's strategy guide. There's a third beta gamer, Hoodlum, who posted a strategy guide on Victoria. Dragonborn, Seal Head Ling Chong, and other Eternal Kingdom gamers browsed the discussion forum. On the front page was a post. Using bare hands to cut trees, Natural Fighter isn't afraid of starting from scratch. This is Natural Fighter Hoodlum. I'm the live broadcaster, Hoodlum, at B Station. I told relatives and friends many times about my third beta test status, so I won't repeat it. I'm sharing with you the situation at Victoria City. As I am playing the game and writing the post, the updates will be slow. I hope that you won't mind. Let's take a look at the pictures of the newly created Victoria. Picture. Don't complain about the low angles of the screenshots. My shoulders were laden with the heavy burden of life, and my spine was broken. Hence, the shot angles were low. You may take a look at my selfie. Picture. Good, back to the main topic. The Freedom City of Victoria is similar to what the veterans speculated. There is only a Dungeon Lord main hall, and the rest is to be built by the gamers. Don't talk about instant houses, cities, or roads, we don't even have a proper construction site. On top of that, the tools aren't sufficient. It's to the point that even the NPCs are dazed and not working. If not for system restriction, I would have robbed that dazed knight of his weapon and decapitated him to help him snap out of his daze. It's fortunate that there are no requirements to become a sacred knight. If you're willing, the bald grand priest will help you. The bald grand priest isn't bald, his name is Bald. Don't ask me why, ask the game producers. Since I am creating a post and broadcasting live, I'm unable to take the examination to become a sacred knight. Even if I go, I'm unable to answer the questions and will lose my life. After the new gamers were teleported to Victoria, they had to swear allegiance to Duchess Lilo. It was as simple as kowtowing at the entrance of the Dungeon Lord main hall. One could kowtow more if they wished. The process was similar to the kowtowing to Lord Sherlock in the dungeon. After that, it's cleaning the location, carrying bricks and wood, and cutting trees. The mission will earn you 100 bronze coins and takes 1 or 2 hours. Only a few hundred gamers have complete tools, while most of the gamers weren't equipped with tools. It's understandable that it is harder at the start of constructing a city. We don't need to mine. On the surface world, if we cut trees, we will create empty space. The wood can also be used to construct houses. Thanks to the veterans' knowledge in the forum, many civil engineering students came forward to become engineers. We didn't encounter problems while constructing houses. Within 3 hours, we constructed houses. Take a look at the picture. Cutting trees in the surface world doesn't require answering questions. Don't ask me, ask the game producers. However, mining ore does require answering questions. I'm speechless. To ace the game, studying is necessary. As I'm writing in a free-flowing way, there may not be logical sequencing. Please bear with it. Let's take a look at the NPCs and location screenshots. Picture. This is Natural Fighter Hoodlum broadcasting live. I look forward to Victoria's first commercial shop. Manual comedy. Dragonborn finished reading the post and examined the pictures. Sealhead Ling Chong pinched his chin and said, "The surface world setting is based on the later part of the medieval age, albeit with the existence of mana. Why are you analyzing the background setting? We have to follow the game producers. They can do whatever they like, it's all mana." Take a spear, Hit said, and Sealhead Ling Chong nodded. The surface world didn't really affect them as the two factions hadn't interacted. They would discuss the future when it arrived. Chapter 317. New plot. Sleep life is important. Rob his days, ha ha ha. This is interesting. Was that character created by a human? Why is the appearance extraordinary and outstanding? Russian family of 5. This house will leak water, you have to patch it with straw. Meeting you at the deep end of my life. Wah. What an ugly and deformed character. Decapitate him. Exploded dice. Are you trying to take up skirt pictures from this angle? In the Dungeon Lord main hall of Eternal Kingdom, Sherlock was browsing the post. Using bare hands to cut trees, Natural Fighter isn't afraid of starting from scratch. Lord Sherlock, the construction of Victoria is going very smoothly. With this progress, we can create a city for 5,000 gamers within a month. Brew was full of optimism. Indeed, Sherlock nodded. Once Victoria City is established and able to survive, we will be able to start smelting and forging. Then we'll select suitable locations for the gamers to fight bandits and magical beasts. We can also set up an Adventurers Guild and share information with the Underworld Adventurers Guild. The gamers from Eternal Kingdom and Victoria can compete. On the surface world, we can intervene in human affairs, like supporting our nominated candidate to be the ruler of the York territory. Based on the combat power of the 5,000 gamers, we can take over the York territory. Using the York territory as our stronghold, we will pledge allegiance to a human kingdom while forming alliances with the nobles. Then, we will initiate the election process in the kingdom by using the 5,000 gamers to defeat the kingdom's army. After that, we will uphold the election by force and nominate Lilo as the queen. We will manipulate the history of the humans' genius plan. Lord Sherlock, I can't see any benefits for you in building Victoria City. Brew said to Sherlock enthusiastically. If I do things according to what you have said, it won't be beneficial to me. If we look further than that and use the gamers as a labor force instead of a conquering force, you will find that a stable stronghold is a much wiser choice. Sherlock picked up his cup of bloody chrysanthemum tea and said, I don't fancy using violence to solve problems. I want to see the two worlds complementing each other. For example, the Underworld is lacking in wood resources but rich in ores. Even the worthless diamond seam ore will be extremely valuable in the surface world. After processing the abundant gold and silver ore in the Underworld, they will fetch high prices in the surface world. On the other hand, the surface world has an abundance of wood resources, which are lacking in the Underworld. All types of hardwood, softwood, and mana wood can be obtained on the surface world. Besides, there are cultivated alchemy materials and mana materials that cannot be found in the Underworld. If we grow bloody chrysanthemum tea leaves on the surface world, since it doesn't require mana for sustenance, the cost becomes low. That will make us a fortune. Sherlock spread out his hands and inhaled deeply before saying, Brew, don't you understand? That is unlimited wealth. Controlling the surface world's trade and resources will spread our influence to all corners of the Underworld and the surface world. In the future, my portrait will be on each magic stone. Wealth is power. I see. Is Victoria City going to be the future trading stronghold? Brew said thoughtfully, after accumulating wealth, we can arm the gamers and purchase gigantic war beasts. We will then start our conquest from Winterfell. We'll discuss this later. Sherlock picked up a crystal ball that showed the figure of a lone ranger. The words, Marco Polo, were above his head. The most important thing is to handle the plot and integrate the Underworld and surface world. I'll arrange for the resources of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria to complement each other. Is Lord Sherlock going to make use of Marco Polo? Brew asked. Why not? Just a simple mission to have him find the way to Victoria. After, we can use missions to have the gamers transport the resources in an endless cycle, rewarding them after completion. Then, the resources can be made into commercial products by the gamers, thus forming a positive loop. Brew said excitedly, "Your ideas are terrific. I didn't think of that. The gamers will find it boring if they only have work missions. I suggest making the transporting and manufacturing of goods faction missions. We have to enhance the plot and increase the conflict between the factions. I suggest destroying a few dungeons. Winterfell is a good choice. It's even better to kill off a few characters. What about the succubus, Evelyn? Sacrifice her since she doesn't do much work and is sponging off of us." Sherlock didn't respond to Brew's suggestions. He focused his attention on the crystal ball and Marco Polo, transferring his mana into the crystal ball. Marco Polo wiped the sweat from his head. He didn't have the sensation of sweating, but the sweat beads impeded his eyesight. Marco Polo had traveled on the path indicated by the old district residents for half a day, right after the start of the third beta test. Marco Polo wasn't sure how long the journey would take. Previously, when he traveled to Winterfell, it took him a few days. Marco Polo rested. When he was about to resume his journey, he saw a green beam that made him panic. Within the light beam, a blurry figure extended his hand towards him and said, "Chosen One, are you willing to accept the mission of your destiny?" Chapter 318. Marco Polo's Strange Encounter Mission. At the teleport portal main hall of Eternal Kingdom, there was a flash of brilliance, and 15 gamers walked noisily out of the portals. A few gamers gathered to find out what happened. The 15 gamers were the first beta gamers from the Pioneer Alliance. Since the start of the 15-member instance dungeon in Spectre College, the Pioneer Alliance had been striving to be the first group to conquer it. It was difficult. 20 days had passed, but none of the guilds were able to conquer the instance dungeon. They were able to complete it, but they ran out of time. The problem was, every time, the boss would be different. After dying tens of times, when they knew how to defeat the boss, they would run out of time. There were no potions to help the gamers strengthen and heal. Though the food had some buff effects, the tiny increase wasn't of much use. To ensure the gamers were in the best condition, after defeating a boss, they would take turns killing themselves and reviving so that they were at peak condition. This reduced both their reputation points and their valuable time. Half of the time was spent reviving and running in the instance dungeon. If there were potions to heal the gamers completely or increase their power within a short time, the instance dungeon would be conquered much easier. With the current alchemy skills of the gamers, it was impossible. When the little fairy bragged to Raintia, she said that there were such potions. However, the side effects were devastating, like dying after 24 hours, the failing of bodily functions after a year, and incontinence during old age. It was a joke. Why would the gamers, who were labeled the fourth calamity, be afraid of the side effects? If the gamers didn't die within 3 days, they would admit defeat. Even if the gamers weren't afraid, they were unable to produce the potions because they didn't have the materials. The little fairy said, "Humph. If I were to cultivate plants at the world tree in sunny conditions, within 3 days, I could produce healing potions. Unless dead, one could recover from most of their injuries. I could also produce life compression biscuits, which have the ability to regenerate life force and heal the body rapidly. But there is no Yggdrasil or sunshine here." After that, the gamers almost formed an expedition to attack Yggdrasil. "Gosh, we lost again. We almost defeated the boss and conquered the instance dungeon." Burning Chest Hair shouted in rage while Peasant patted his shoulders and made a gesture of pinching the universe in his fingertips. "Chest Hair bro, is you're almost referring to half a boss? I'm exhausted after playing for 12 hours. I'm done. I'll get offline to rest and do some facials. Arthur bro, let's chat on WeChat later." Sylvanas stood beside Arthur, but he shook his head and said, "No, I'll research how to change my race to orc. Since the discussion forum has information on orcs, there must be a way to change. Let me talk to the NPCs to find out if I can accept missions. Let me accompany you. I'm going to write a strategy guide on changing races. I haven't been creating strategy guides recently," Not Wearing Pants said. I'm going, Peasant shouted. "Vanas, you'll go offline without us," Burning Chest Hair said to Sylvanas. The rest of the gamers also indicated that they wanted to know more about the mission for becoming an orc. Sylvanas noticed that she was being ostracized and became mad. She grasped Burning Chesthair's neck and smiled as she said, "If Arthur Bro is going, I'll definitely follow. I'm most compliant with Arthur. Aren't you going to do your facials? If you don't, what if your facial hair becomes too long? Then you won't be able to be a cute gal anymore." Instead of grasping Burning Chesthair's neck, Sylvanas strangled him. The gamers became boisterous and forgot all about their defeat in the instant's dungeon. Arthur didn't join in the fun and instead looked at the nearby flower bed. There were many gamers gathering over there in a queue waiting to cultivate plants in the soil. Arthur looked around but didn't see Raintea's figure. Arthur looked at the little fairy, who was lying in a treehouse and spitting saliva viciously at gamers who got near or climbed the tree. The scene was like a riot control water cannon shooting and dispersing a crowd. While Arthur was pondering, a gamer exited the teleport portal and shouted, "Come quickly. I received Victoria's strange encounter mission." The gamer was Marco Polo. "Gosh, Marco Polo created another new plot," Peasant exclaimed, while not wearing pants, who was being strangled by Sylvanas, freed himself and charged forward. Arthur and the rest of the gamers followed up. Before long, a crowd gathered before Marco Polo. He was wearing shorts, which indicated that he had revived. When he saw the crowd, he told them about his strange encounter mission. When Marco Polo was searching for Victoria, a green beam appeared. But Marco Polo wasn't sure if there was a living being. The being in the light claimed to be a prophet. The being told Marco Polo, "Your direction is wrong, but I'm touched by your adventurous spirit. Because of some reasons, I'm unable to be close to Eternal Kingdom. Please inform Lord Sherlock to be careful with Victoria City. Whether it's peace or destruction, the choice is in our hands." That was the mysterious conversation. It was a strange encounter mission. Marco Polo was so excited that he abandoned his luggage and committed suicide. He wanted to return to Eternal Kingdom in the fastest time to complete his strange encounter mission. Chapter 319. I'm not bothered by Raintea. Marco Polo talked incessantly. Before the gamers reacted, the door of the Dungeon Lord main hall was opened. Sherlock walked out, followed by Eggface, who shut the door. Sherlock was dressed in a noble's long robe. After accepting the swearing of allegiance from the gamers, he was dressed like this. "What is the commotion about, my citizens?" Sherlock's voice wasn't loud, but the exertion of dominance made the gamers stay at a distance and become quiet. The gamers entered the plot animation mode. Sherlock looked at the half-naked Marco Polo and walked towards him as he asked, "My servant, I sense a familiar mana on your body. What did you encounter?" Marco Polo felt his weight getting lighter before he was lifted up by Sherlock's mana, which seeped into his eyes, nose, mouth, and ears. Finally, there was a light beam from the sky, and a green figure appeared in the beam and repeated what he said to Marco Polo. Sherlock looked grave as he put Marco Polo down. He said to the restrained gamers, "It's Victoria City, they found us, and they're building a new stronghold." A clear crystal ball appeared in Sherlock's hand, and the images on the crystal ball were projected in front of the gamers. It showed a group of gamers carrying bricks diligently at the surface world city of Victoria. They were smiling merrily. Sherlock said worriedly, "They have large numbers. If they establish a stronghold and attack us, we won't be able to defeat them. Warriors, we have to react. We must prepare beforehand as a vicious battle awaits us." After his speech, Sherlock returned to the Dungeon Lord main hall, and a mission notice appeared before the gamers. For example, a mission appeared before Sealhead Ling Chong. Mission title: Faction Conflict, Mining Ore. Mission description: Our enemy is Victoria City. War requires a vast amount of weapons and armor. Use your knowledge to forge as many weapons and pieces of armor as possible. Eternal Kingdom needs you. Mission objective: Mine diamond seam, 0/10. Mine rock ore, 0/10. Mission reward: after completion of the mission, you will receive 100 reputation points. Faction: Eternal Kingdom. Besides stone masonry, mining, and carrying ore, all other missions were preparations for war that included the accumulation of weapons, building materials, metal ores, gold, silver, and other miscellaneous items. Though the gamers weren't sure about the use of the faction reputation points of Eternal Kingdom, from their experience, they could be exchanged for titles, battle emblems, rare rides, or pets. The gamers would like to give the Hellhound pets a pass as they were extremely ugly. They started working hard to earn more faction reputation points. The same situation applied to Victoria, with the exception of the spokesman, who wasn't Lilo but her first assistant, Big Boss Hamster. Citizens of Victoria City, I'm the first assistant of Duchess Lilo and am announcing the order of Duchess Lilo. To prepare for the Underworld threat, we have to make haste and build our Victoria City. We must prepare more resources to boost our war efforts. After the announcement, the gamers received missions to gather wood, special plants, and even fish. Both the gamers of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City were hard at work. Arthur's mission was to sort out the ores that were mined by the gamers. He was then to place them into a chest on top of a beetleman. Eternal Kingdom received 10 beetlemans after the first battle at Winterfell. They received even more after the second battle and from the compensation from the Hades Devil Kings. Altogether, Eternal Kingdom had more than 100 beetlemans, and every 50 gamers were allocated a single beetleman. The gamers didn't have a chance to ride the beetlemans individually, as they were used as train rides to the beginners' training grounds, Spider's Lair, and the Marsh Inkspewer town. Now the beetlemans were used to transport the materials and equipment accumulated by the gamers. This required many days. Arthur was mechanically transporting the ores to the chests on the beetleman. Opposite him was Dragonborn, who was also transporting rocks. They received the same mission. One of them was the most powerful first beta gamer, while the other one was the most lethal second beta gamer. They fought before, so they knew each other. However, Dragonborn wasn't as famous as Arthur. How's the recruitment of fresh blood to the guild? Dragonborn felt he should say something, as he would prefer their relationship to be friendship instead of competition. It was common for gamers to fight in guild wars, though some gamers preferred to make more friends. Some gamers preferred PvE, some liked PvP, while others wanted PvX. The chests are full, Arthur said, looking distracted. Dragonborn felt awkward. As he started the conversation, he had to continue. After pondering, he said, "Yes, I didn't see Raintia. Is she a member of the Pioneer Alliance? Is she not feeling well? It was strange that she didn't get online during the start of third beta testing." Arthur was taken aback. He shook his head and said, "I don't know. I wasn't bothered." "Ah, I see." Dragonborn nodded. While he was thinking of what to say, Take a Spearhead dashed to him and shouted, "Gosh, did you take a look at the forum?" The gamers at Victoria saw veteran Raintia. It's rumored that she has changed faction. Chapter 320. Brainiac's New Research. Evelyn sat in the office of the Adventurers Guild, smiling professionally while recording the requests of the Winterfell residents. She recorded requests such as finding lost chicks, taking care of kids, and clearing clogged toilet bowls. Suddenly, she felt as though she was working for the Civil Administration Office of the Merchants Alliance. These registered requests were assigned to the gamers at first chance. She witnessed how the gamers completed the missions that nobody wanted to do, feeling both moved and guilty at the same time. Previously, Evelyn thought that the gamers were nutcases and looked down on them. However, seeing their friendly and warm-hearted manner in helping those lonely elderly folks, Evelyn realized the sincerity underneath their green skin. A few green-skinned creatures and a houndhead man appeared before her. "Evelyn, we're here to inquire about things." Evelyn found the leader familiar. He was not wearing pants, who had a strange name. She was familiar with him because he would arrange for his members to accept group missions. "How can I help you?" She smiled even though they weren't customers. "We would like to inquire about faction changes." "Did Raintia change her faction?" Not wearing pants asked. "Faction? Raintia?" Evelyn was dumbfounded, not understanding his question. "Ah, I knew that the succubus wouldn't know. Let's look for Shirley. He's a high-level NPC, so he'll know about faction changes." Not wearing pants turned his head and left in disappointment. He chatted as he walked. "This game doesn't have a system for inquiring about faction changes. If our friends change factions, we won't know about it," Burning Chesthair complained. "Yes, the design is illogical." Peasant nodded in agreement and said, "I suggest we create a post on the forum to complain in hopes that the game officials can improve and create an inquiry system." "Arthur bro, just now, your expression looked horrible." Sylvanas looked at Arthur, who was in deep thought. He lifted his head and said in a daze, "Ah? Wah, did you take a liking to Raintia?" Not wearing pants asked suddenly. "It's possible. Raintia is the gentlest of all gamers. She's very nice in the game and must be awesome in real life." "Arthur bro, Are you smitten by Rantia? Sylvanas looked as though she was breaking down. It was difficult for a gnome to have such an expression. Impossible. It was Dragonborn and his companions who asked around about Rantia, then we came to find out more. Arthur hasn't said a word. Sister Vannas, don't be sad, Arthur's heart is with you. Peasant consoled Sylvanas. Peasant, aren't you afraid you might be struck by lightning? Burning Chest Hair smiled broadly and said, you're bootlicking Sister Vannas. Aren't you going to fawn over Arthur as well? No, Arthur bro is easier to deal with than Sister Vannas, Peasant said seriously. In the next moment, Burning Chest Hair and Peasant were clipped under Sylvanas' armpits. Huh? Both of you fellows didn't think much of me? Of course I know that Arthur only likes me. Who needs trash like you to spout nonsense? They bickered as they walked outside the Adventurers Guild. As they were about to look for Shirley, a skeleton frame blocked their way. Can I do research on you? Number 526. The servants of Eternal Kingdom follow certain behavioral patterns. New sprouting of love or couples will appear in a daze. Simply said, they are like a machine that exists for a tool. In this journal, this item was struck off and replaced with new content. Amended number 526. Discovered their complex feelings and doing follow-up research. So, Arthur likes Rantia, Sylvanas likes Arthur. Not wearing pants likes Sylvanas or Arthur. Burning Chest Hair and Peasant may like each other. Brainiac was looking at the four gnomes and Houndhead Man and trying to figure out their relationships. Wait, Brainiac, is there a misunderstanding? Aren't we looking for Rantia? Yes, I will make a complaint against you if you slander me. Exciting, the NPC is teaching us about courtship. No, this isn't courtship. Considering Sylvanas' guy identity, we are in a large-scale five-guy confusion in a messy situation. Look at my expression. What? I'm not as perverted as you, so I can't integrate well. DMN. Ha 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 ha. Brainiac looked at the five of them bickering, unable to discern who was speaking what. I will convey your questions to Lord Sherlock, Brainiac said to them. Not wearing pants and his companions were eager to find out whether Rantia had changed faction, so they wouldn't stay with Brainiac. They were surprised when Brainiac looked for them to do research, but it wasn't the first few times that Brainiac did research. He had done dissection before, so this was nothing. Brainiac went to look for Lord Sherlock in Eternal Kingdom. Brainiac's current jobs were to do alchemy, create magical items, and manage the Adventurers Guild. Due to a shortage of materials, the alchemy and magical item creation couldn't be carried out. Most of the time, Brainiac was at the Adventurers Guild, observing the gamers. Now, he had a new research topic. Dong, dong, dong. Brainiac knocked on the door of the Dungeon Lord main hall. It opened, and Eggface stood at the doorway with sleepy eyes. Ah, Brainiac. Eggface rubbed his eyes and walked back into the room. Remember to close the door, Eggface said as he squirmed his body at a messy corner nest that was made of mud, tree branches, grass roots, and metal products. Soon, he fell asleep, snoring loudly. Though Eggface had his own nest, he looked as though he was sleeping in the Dungeon Lord main hall. What's the matter, Brainiac? Sherlock, who was sitting behind the table, lifted his head and looked at Brainiac. Chapter 321. Sherlock's Letter. You are very concerned about the well-being of those gamers. Sherlock clasped his hands together and supported his chin as he said to Brainiac, you suspect that the gnomes and Houndhead men have homosexual tendencies and interracial love relationships, and you want to do detailed research? Yes, it's an important research topic to me, Brainiac said as he nodded. I understand, you may proceed with the research. Sherlock nodded, but Brainiac didn't leave. He asked, do you have other matters? I have a few questions. Brainiac took out his journal and asked, the group of gnomes and Houndhead men is looking for a goblin called Rantia. What is special about her? Why are they so concerned about her? Along the way, I got inquiries about Rantia too. Rantia is a very zen goblin. I have an impression of her. They were looking for her not because she played an important role but for friendship and love, which are filled with positive feelings. Sherlock nodded and explained, I see. Brainiac nodded. As he was leaving, Sherlock said, yes, be gentler when you do research and don't use violence. A gamer complained that you slandered them. I understand. I'll continue with my work. Brainiac bowed before leaving. Lord Sherlock, I've checked, nobody has changed factions. It wouldn't even be possible for Raintia. Less than 10 gamers are able to pay the 100 magic stones fee for changing factions, Bruce said as Brainiac was leaving. She must have some issues at home and therefore isn't online today. I didn't expect her to be so popular. I didn't either. The gamers didn't have any reaction to the beautiful Evelyn, but they care so much about Raintia, who's a goblin. Is there a problem with their sense of beauty? Sherlock was puzzled and asked. It's because Raintia is a suitable candidate for online love. Evelyn is just a beautiful NPC. Bruce said, Lord Sherlock, these matters aren't related to our plan. It's important to build the tunnel between Victoria and Eternal Kingdom so that we can complement each other. Then, we can have a continuous supply of all things alchemy, magical items, and equipment to sell to the gamers. When we have enough magic stones and a number of large siege weapons, we can start on our plan to conquer the world. We can start, I understand. I will begin from Winterfell in the conquest of the Underworld. Sherlock didn't hide his condescending tone. Brew continued to expound on the plans for the future conquest. In the academic department of Spectre College, have more concern for the next generation and sweat for the future. Manage a good school to educate Spectre geniuses. A skeleton who was wearing a western suit and a black hat passed a flag to Bacon as he said, Professor Bacon, thank you for educating my child, who is now graduating and becoming a useful Spectre. It's all thanks to your mentoring. Yes, Professor Bacon. If not for your education, he wouldn't be able to obtain the Level A graduation certificate, said a smiling female skeleton that was wearing a bright red overcoat. Son, quickly kowtow to the teacher. Two skeletons looked at a young skeleton who was in a black graduation cap and gown. The young skeleton knelt down and shouted loudly, Thank you, Professor Bacon. Then he, kowtowed and scattered white bone powder on the ground. Don't stand on ceremony. This is what I should do. Professor Bacon helped the young kowtowing skeleton up. On Bacon's forehead were timeless cracks that indicated the long period of education service that he had rendered. After the parents expressed their gratitude, they left a token of appreciation and brought their son out of Professor Bacon's office. On the table were a magic stone card, special protein powder for osteoporosis, a basket of salted fish, a huge box of bloody chrysanthemum tea, a few Winterfell shopping cards, a lifetime coupon for the Underworld volcano tour, a basket of native chicken eggs, and a Winterfell hair perming coupon. Professor Bacon, don't be too hard on yourself. Keep those things that you deserve, another teacher said to Professor Bacon. We don't teach because of these things. If the students work hard and become useful Spectres, I'll be more than satisfied, Bacon smiled and said. Only with Professor Bacon's teaching will we get a genius student like Brainiac. Another lich professor complimented Bacon. Yes, I heard that Brainiac saved Winterfell. What? I heard that Eternal Kingdom saved Winterfell. Brainiac is the important lich in Eternal Kingdom. Since Eternal Kingdom saved Winterfell, then Brainiac saved Winterfell. Everyone chatted enthusiastically and praised Bacon's efforts. When the bell rang, everyone left for their classes. Bacon arranged his textbooks nicely and got ready to leave for class. However, before he left, a letter shot out from the furnace. On the letter were the words, Dearest Professor Bacon, Lord Sherlock. Chapter 322. I'm telling you a secret. Lord Sherlock's letter? Professor Bacon was surprised by the letter. He opened it to see the words, Dearest Professor Bacon, greetings, it's Lord Sherlock from Eternal Kingdom. It has been quite some time since we met, and I am missing you. Recently, Eternal Kingdom went through an expansion phase. Everyone in Eternal Kingdom wants to help Spectre College in the graduation examination. There's even a portion of a new friendly race that would like to extend their help. If you are free, please come to Eternal Kingdom for a detailed discussion. Lord Sherlock. Bacon grabbed his things and took the letter to the principal's office. He was smiling gently. He could tutor those poor students again. Arthur and his companions didn't manage to find Raintia. In a small little house, they found Raintia's goblin body and were relieved. Before the commencement of the third beta testing, she moved her body to the little house. If her body was still around, it meant that she hadn't changed factions. The Victorian faction found a post that was suspected to be from Raintia, but it was confirmed to be false. Dragonborn was extremely concerned about the continual disappearance of Raintia. Do you think that Raintia quit the game? Dragonborn tapped a large rock using his tool. His mission was to process the stone slabs into standard sizes, as the processed stone slabs would become good construction materials. I don't know. If I was growing crops and vegetables every day, I'd definitely quit the game. Take a spear hit, who was sitting next to Dragonborn, said firmly. But that's veteran Raintia. Sealhead Ling Chong, who was sitting on the other side of Dragonborn, said with uncertainty. Wait, if she's into growing plants, isn't it better to grow them in real life? Perhaps she's a plant lover and an internet addict? Take a spear hit speculated. This combination is too rare. Sealhead Ling Chong and Take a spear hit started debating. Dragonborn said worriedly, I'll message her using WeChat. I'm a little worried that she hasn't been online for the entire day. Sealhead Ling Chong and Take a spear hit, who were bickering, stopped and looked bewilderedly at Dragonborn. Gosh, since when did you have Raintea's WeChat contact information? No, I should rephrase. Why did you ask Raintea for her WeChat info? Dragonborn was shocked and immediately explained himself. Don't be mistaken, we're just friends who exchanged WeChat info. I brought seeds to her every time, so we got to know each other. Sealhead Ling Chong and Take a spear hit were suspicious of Dragonborn's intentions, and they both started asking questions. Is Raintea pretty? Is her voice sweet? Is she a gal? Is she rich? Is she a wheelchair-bound vulnerable pretty gal? Dragonborn had no intention to answer the deluge of questions. He said, I don't know. He evaded all the questions. Dragonborn reminded them, don't talk nonsense. A lot of people asked Raintea for her WeChat info but didn't get it. I gave her a lot of seeds, so she gave it to me. Take a spear hit patted his chest and proclaimed, don't worry, I'm tight-lipped and won't spread rumors. The efficiency of the gamers was high. Within 2 days, they had prepared all of the raw materials for building Victoria City. The Eternal Kingdom gamers weren't told that they were gathering materials for Victoria City. Instead, they were told that the materials were for war preparations. Over 100 beetlemans helped to complete the transportation of materials. It was only a matter of time before they set off. Take a spear hit stood beside a beetleman, having been fortunate enough to receive a mission. Mission title: Escort the war materials. Mission description: Warriors, the war materials that you prepared will be used by the non-existing intelligence organization to build a reliable stronghold in Victoria City. As the mission duration is about a day and a night, only those gamers who can stay online for a long period of time were assigned this mission. Mission objective: Follow the small black dragon and escort the war materials to the designated location. Then follow the small black dragon back to Eternal Kingdom. Mission reward: 200 Eternal Kingdom faction reputation points. Though the mission duration was long, very few gamers would give up this mission as the faction reputation points were high. Moreover, there were no more material preparation missions. This was the only mission that would earn faction reputation points. They didn't know the use of the faction reputation points, but they knew the points would be very useful. Take a spear hit felt that his luck wasn't bad as he waited merrily for the beetlemans to set off while he chatted with his companions. A gnome stood beside Take a spear hit and chatted with him. Only 50 gamers received this mission, and each gamer would escort 2 beetlemans. However, the beetlemans were gentle creatures, so they didn't require much supervision. Nobody knows how to change to the orc race. The gnome was part of the Pioneer Alliance, but he wasn't a first beta gamer but a second beta gamer. I'm happy being a gnome. Someone will eventually find out how to become an orc, then I'll become one. That's true. The gnome nodded. Take a spear hit hesitated for half a day before he blurted out to the gnome, Hey, I'm telling you a secret. Chapter 323. Rumors. In the commercial area of Eternal Kingdom Dungeon. Selling swords. The best swords in town. That's hilarious. Did you watch the news yesterday? The hat flew away when he was hit. Selling a large amount of metal coins. 5 yuan for 100 bronze coins. Hurry, the game coin rate fell again. It's normal. With the huge influx of gamers, the rate should drop. It would be strange if it rises. Listen to me. Accumulate the coins, the rate will increase later on. Gosh, why is that? The reputation level of the new gamers isn't high enough for green and blue equipment. Once they have reached the required level and want to change their equipment, there will be a huge demand for game coins. Will the rate not increase then? Awesome. Bro, teach me. I heard people say that earning money is easy, and some even make large profits. So, why can't I earn money? Wait until you become a gnome or become wise like hemp rope technology. If you cut trees, you can become rich. Make haste if you want to log trees, the forest is getting bare. 6666. The terrain is being changed by the gamers, it's awesome. Besides doing business in the commerce area, the gamers also chatted and bragged about their feats. A gamer said to another gamer, "Did you know that Dragonborn and Reintia are together?" "When was that?" "I don't know when. I only heard about it." "Who said that? Is it reliable?" "Reliable. It's from the higher management of Dragon Raja. They even met each other in real life." "Gosh, he traveled long distance?" Dragonborn was the runner-up for the Dark Rider tournament, only second to Arthur. "Isn't it normal for him to be with Goddess Reintia?" "That's cracking me up. Since when did Reintia become a goddess?" "Is a goblin pretty?" "You don't know anything. The character is super attractive. If she's not a goddess, who is?" "I feel that she's a green TB*TCH and a pretender." "Stop your nonsense. Place your flag at gate number 2, I'll beat you to death today." With the chatting of gamers, the creation of posts on the forum, and messaging on QQ and WeChat, rumors spread like wildfire. When Arthur heard the news, it was already the second day. "I didn't expect Reintia to be with Dragonborn." Peasant shook his head as he sat on the ground and ate a spider leg covered with clay. There were a few gamers sitting by his side resting. They were a 15-member group in the Spectre College Instance Dungeon, and they had defeated the second boss. After a total annihilation, a few wounded gamers committed suicide to return to the dungeon and were currently running back to the Instance Dungeon. Peasant, Arthur, and a few of them were in good condition, so they sat on the ground and chatted as they waited for their team members. There was a giant mixed blood skeleton wandering around nearby. It was the third boss of the Instance Dungeon. Arthur, who was sharpening his weapon, was dumbfounded. A gamer at the side said, "It's online love," and one of them traveled a long distance to meet the other, though it's unclear whether it was the guy or gal who traveled. "I'm green with envy. I'd like to have an online love relationship." "What's up with this online love?" "It's the online love relationship between a guy and a gal. He has been playing Sword Online 3, so he spoke in that manner." "I don't think Reintia performs daily missions, does she?" "She doesn't play PvE or PvP. Perhaps they farm together?" "I don't see Dragonborn farming." "You have been in the Instance Dungeon daily, so how do you know?" "This has got nothing to do with the 2-day disappearance of Reintia. I heard Reintia is pregnant. It's normal for a pregnant woman to be absent from online games." "Would you play games if you were pregnant?" "Palm." The gamers heard a loud noise and turned their heads to see Arthur in a daze. The weapon in his hand had fallen to the ground. Pa-da, pa-da. 100 beetlemans ran along the Underworld tunnel. Dragonborn was on top of a beetleman. Even though it was noisy, he complained to Take a Spearhit, who was on top of another beetleman, saying, "Bro, I told you not to tell other people." Arthur was asking about my relationship with Reintia in a private chat. With the widespread rumors in the discussion forum, how am I going to face Reintia in the future? If she sees the rumor, she'll blacklist me. What, even Arthur is concerned about this matter? I thought rich gamers didn't care about 818. Take a Spearhit was surprised. Sealhead Ling Chong, who was at the side, quickly said, "What's this 818 about?" "This is just a rumor." "How did you spread it?" "I didn't say anything." "If you don't believe me, ask that guy." Take a Spearhit turned his head to look behind. In the large group of beetlemans, he didn't see the guild member of the Pioneer Alliance. "Gosh. Where is he, that bro from the Pioneer Alliance?" "He was crushed by a beetleman and died a horrible death," someone joked. "Enough. Stop explaining. Your mouth is as solid as welded steel." "I understand now." Sealhead Ling Chong waved his hand. Another gamer smiled and asked curiously, "What does that mean?" "Steel door," Sealhead Ling Chong said. Then he spoke to Dragonborn. "Dragonborn, don't be bothered. It's just a rumor and will die off by itself. Everyone thinks that both you and Reintia are a couple. Perhaps it'll become true. You and Reintia will become the first faction couple of Eternal Kingdom, isn't that cool?" "Yes, you have to thank me then." Take a Spearhit nodded. Dragonborn wasn't angered by Take a Spearhit's words, and he said, "Why did Arthur ask about this issue in a private chat? Does he like Reintia too?" Do you think Arthur would like Raintia and be involved in an online love? Stop joking. Do you think that rich gamers don't have many girlfriends? Perhaps he's a groom every night, a gamer said with envy. Stop it, I'm green with jealousy. The gamers chatted jovially while Dragonborn was in agony. Before long, the convoy stopped, and Eggface, who was in the lead, shouted, "Unload all of the goods."